Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this morning's meeting of the Licensing Committee. Today, Thursday, November the 24th, 2022. And my first remit is to elect a chair. So as the presiding person and chair of the Licensing Committee, I will put forward, please, nominations for chair of the subcommittee. Do I have any nominations?
Yeah, yourself, please, Chair.
And do I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. So moving straight then to housekeeping, and I'll ask our clerk, please, Ms Hollyoak, if she'd kindly take us through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Please ensure that you unmute yourself and always turn on the video function before speaking. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. After each person has made their representation, the Chair will ask each person in turn if they have any questions or comments. However, if at any point you would like to speak again, please use the raise your hand function at the top right of the screen. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Hollyoak. So do we have any apologies, please, Mrs Hollyoak?
No, there are no apologies.
Thank you very much. So moving on then to item 3, which is declarations of interest. I'll ask each subcommittee member if they have declarations of interest. Councillor Kelsey, any declarations of interest?
Only for the second item, have in the past frequented the property and I am aware of the owners, etc. But they are not prejudicial to my views on the application.
Thank you very much for that notification, Councillor Kelsey. And Councillor Johnson?
No declarations, Chair, thank you.
And for completeness, I have no declarations of interest with regard to this item. Moving on then to has been sent to you, which is the protocol for public speaking, and you will have this circulated with your agenda sheet at item 4. So moving to the substantive, which is item 5, which is an application for premises licence at MV Margarita, moored at Elgin's Boatyard, Christchurch. And an application has been received for a new premises licence for the premises known as MV, which I believe stands for Marine Vehicle, although I wasn't too certain of the shortening. Margarita, moored at Elgin's Boatyard, Christchurch, and this matter is brought before the Licensing Subcommittee for determination. So I'll now introduce everybody, and when I introduce you, if you'd like to state your role, please. So my name is Councillor Jude Butt, and I'm the chair of the Licensing Committee, and I'm the chair of the subcommittee for the purposes of today's business. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Councillor Johnson.
Chair, Councillor Toby Johnson, ward member for Alderney and Bourne Valley and member of this subcommittee today.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Kelsey?
Yeah, member for East Cliff and Springbourne Ward, vice chair of the Licensing Board and a member of this committee today.
Thank you very much. We have Councillor Lawrence, and Lawrence is standing in as our reserve. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for staying today. We have a full house, but I would ask you, please, if you could be available, just in case you're needed with regard to the second item. We do this because we have had people called away or people who are unwell, and we do need to have 3 members to hold the meetings. So thank you very much for your attendance, Councillor Williams. So now for the applicant, Mr. Day.
Good morning, Ma'am and your colleagues. My name is Philip with Lacey's Solicitors in Bournemouth. I'm here to represent the applicant, Lewis Malone, and MV stands for motor vessel, Ma'am.
Motor vessel, thank you so much indeed.
Motor vessel, Margaret. Yes.
We had motor or marine, and I got it wrong. So thank you so much for
no problem.
that advice. Bless you, thank you. And Mr. Malone, are you with us?
I'm Lewis Malone. I'm the applicant today.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. And we also have Mr. Sims, who's waiting in the wings as an observer with Mr. Day. Mr. White?
My name is Jim White. I live at Priory Quay, which is adjacent to Elkin's Boatyard, and I'm an objector.
Thank you very much, Mr. White.
You're muted, Avril.
Sorry. Yes, I'm Councillor Avril Colton. I'm a town councillor for the Priory Ward, and I'm here representing my residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Colton. Mrs. Cole?
Good morning. I'm the legal advisor to today's meeting.
Thank you. And Tanya Jardim?
Hello, Tanya Jardine, licensing officer, and who dealt with the application.
Thank you very much. And Mrs. Hollyoak?
Morning, Jill Hollyoak, clerk to the subcommittee.
And we also have Kieran Clark, who is a clerk, who is attending. He's from services and he's observing for training purposes. You're very welcome. Mr. Clark, I don't know if it's your first visit, but I hope that you find matters interesting and that it helps with regard to training for the purposes of the licensing subcommittee. So just to check with everybody that everybody who wishes to speak has actually intoned that they so wish, and anybody who wishes to withdraw from speaking, please indicate now. There's no indication, so I will take that we're all content. I'll now go through our procedure, which is regard to order of speaking, and the licensing officer will present her report. Applicant will make their application by all parties. Members of the subcommittee will go first. Everybody will have an opportunity to raise questions. Our responsible authorities, we have none today, but we do have other persons. So the other persons, or our objectors, as they're so called, will make their representations of our objectors, and members of the subcommittee will go first. And then at the end of the debate and discussions, all will be given a full opportunity to sum up, and the party who spoke last will go first. I'll then conclude the hearing and we'll deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk. And notification of the committee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day on the last day in which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is today, Thursday, 24th of November. And the notification of decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. So if everybody is happy, I'll just ask that we all agree that we're content with that process. So Mr. Day, are you content?
I am.
And Mr. Malone?
I am.
Mr. White?
I am.
Councillor Coulton?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And Mrs. Cole?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
And Tanya Jardim?
Yes, I am, thank you.
Mrs. Jardim, Tanya, or Miss?
Mrs.
Thank you so much. I didn't want to use your whole name, but I didn't want to be rude and give you a title which wasn't yours. So, Mrs. Jardim, thank you so much. So, finally, I just remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they've already given in writing, because the subcommittee would have read that in full and understand that. But it's an opportunity to expand on your written representations and give us further information. And all questions, please, must be asked through the chairman, and no cross-examination of parties. So with that said, we'll ask Mrs. Jardim, please, you have the floor to present your report. Thank you, Mrs. Jardim.
Thank you, Chair. So before I give an introduction to my report, I just want to make you aware of an error that was on the report. It's been brought to my attention that the boatyard where the boat was moored is actually Elkins boatyard, not Elgins, as is referred to on the application, in my report and some of the documentation. So the application before you today is to consider whether to grant a premises licence for MV Margarita. This is a boat from which the applicant wishes to operate fishing trips and pleasure cruises in the local area. Application was submitted by Mr. Philip Day of Lacey's on behalf of Mr. Lewis Malone on the 5th of September 2022. The application made is for the supply of alcohol on the vessel Monday to Sunday, 1000 to 2300 hours, and for off sales on a maximum of 12 days in each calendar year when the vessel is moored on Christchurch River and when a charitable or fundraising event is taking place in Christchurch, close to where the vessel is moored. The Licensing Act applies to vessels as if they were a premises, and Section 182 guidance states that a vessel which is not permanently moored or berthed is treated as if it were premises situated in a place where it is usually moored or berthed. The purpose of requiring an address where the vessel will be usually moored
is to establish which local authority an applicant will apply to for a premises licence. Elkins Boatyard is within BCP Council area. There is no requirement for a vessel to have a particular long-term mooring for an application or for a premises licence to remain valid. Being a vessel rather than a fixed structure, there is an expectation that it will roam. If the premises licence is granted, the premises licence holder should advise the licensing authority if the address of where the vessel usually moors changes. The licensing office initially received 22 representations against the application from other persons, but 4 have now been withdrawn. The representations were based on the 4 licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the protection of children from harm. Many of the representations, and in particular one from BCP Council's Biodiversity Officer, related to bird and wildlife, and the Christchurch River being a site of special scientific interest. Although bird and wildlife does not fall within the remit of the Licensing Act, we were advised by the Biodiversity Officer that under the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act 2006, the Council must, in exercising its functions, have a statutory duty to have regard to the purpose of conserving biodiversity. We sought external advice, legal advice, to clarify how this fitted with the Licensing Act. However, following discussions with Mr. Lewis's legal representative, Mr. Day, and consultation with Natural England, the Biodiversity Officer confirmed that the application did not have a likely significant effect on features of the Solent and Dorset Coast Special Protection Area and withdrew his representation. We received 100 representations in support of the application and no representations from any of the responsible authorities. Members are asked to consider whether to grant this application as applied for, refuse the application, or grant the application subject to conditions being added. Should the licence be granted and the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any responsible authorities or other persons may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jardine. For people to ask questions on points of fact with regard to Mrs. Jardine's report. So I'll look to our members first. Councillor Johnson, are there any questions on points of fact?
None on points of fact. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Kelsey?
Not at this time, thank you, Chair.
No, ma'am.
Thank you. And Mr. Malone? Mr. Malone, do you have any questions on points of fact with regard to Mrs. Jardine's report?
Lewis, you're muted.
You may be muted, Mr. Malone.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. No questions.
No worries. No worries. That's fine. Do you have any questions on points of fact for Mr. For the officer's submission? Are there any questions on points of fact?
None from me, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. White?
None from me.
And Councillor Coulton?
No, none from me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report. It was most useful that you took us through with regard to the advice about the SSSI and the biodiversity. It was very important that everybody understood that, and grateful for the time taken to have ascertained that on behalf of the committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Jardine. So moving forward then, applicant Mr. Day to put forward his submission on behalf of Mr. Malone. Mr. Day, I take it you'll be speaking on behalf of Mr. Malone?
That's the intention, yes.
Thank you
if
very
you
much.
have questions that you will
Indeed.
come to, somebody else might have.
Indeed, if that is felt to be the way, I will raise that. So, Mr. Day, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that you have all received the written response and the pictures of the vessel?
Yes, we have the extra paper. Thank you very much. I'll just check that everybody, members, all members are nodding. I believe all parties do. Thank you, Mr. Day. Please continue.
then you will see that this is a relatively small fishing boat, motor vessel, or whatever. For your information and just to confirm, in order for it to have passengers and paying passengers in particular, it has to tick all sorts of other boxes and obtain other permissions and the like. In exactly the same way, if you're talking about licensed premises, a pub or an off license would need to comply with fire regulations, have the appropriate planning consent, comply with building regulations, health and safety, food safety, and everything else. And exactly the same principle applies to this vessel. And it has to tick all of those boxes before it can take any paying passengers on board. There appears to have been something of a misnomer, a misunderstanding about the exact intention here. Some people have described it as a party boat, for example, or a floating off license. That is simply not the case. It can take, or it will be permitted to take a maximum of 12 passengers and 2 crew. If you want to charter the boat, you won't be able to charter it and then pilot it or navigate it or sail it yourself. You have to have the skipper and his or her mate, and the skipper and his or her mate has to have the relevant tickets in order to be able to sail safely and look after all of their passengers and the like. This boat has a long history that I'm sure Mr. Malone would be delighted to tell you about if you really want to know. But suffice it to say that it's operated in the Christchurch area, around Hengistbury Head and out into the Solent for a great number of years. Mr. Malone acquired the vessel not so very long ago, and has spent a great deal of time and indeed money in refurbishing it and turning it into something that is perhaps a little unique. If you look at the photos, you'll see in particular one that shows the cooking facilities on board. And part of the object of the exercise is that those who charter it to go fishing can cook what they catch whilst they're at sea. None of that needs a license under the Licensing Act. Equally, under the Licensing Act, you need nothing to allow people to bring their own alcohol on board and to consume it to their heart's content. And there is nothing to prevent Mr. Malone from charging people corkage for the privilege, as I'm sure you'll be aware some unlicensed restaurants do in this locality. The only issue is really whether or not he should be allowed to sell alcohol on board or not. What we have to say is that if one has regard to the licensing objectives, then allowing or granting a license and allowing the sale and supply of alcohol on board by Mr. Malone would actually enhance each and every one of the licensing objectives, because it gives you control. You can attach conditions and those conditions would restrict the activity and so on and so forth. So, for example, if you start at the beginning, if the vessel wasn't licensed, then Mr. Malone would have great difficulty in controlling alcohol being brought on board and its consumption. If bringing your own alcohol is banned, basically as it is in any unlicensed premises in the country, then the crew, who incidentally, they're not allowed to drink, not whilst they're sailing the vessel and whilst they're in charge of it. The crew can monitor what's going on, can control what's going on, regulate consumption and the like. We've also proposed conditions with, the use of glass and cans and so on and so forth, with very much an eye to littering from the vessel and so on and so forth. And again, an element of control if a license is granted that wouldn't otherwise be there. The question with regard to biodiversity was really this. given that the vessel will be able to sail regardless, will be able to catch fish, cook fish regardless, consume the food, and people can consume their own alcohol on board. What difference is it going to make in terms of any impact on the local environment, in terms of biodiversity, triple SIs, and all of that sort of thing? And having exchanged lengthy emails with your biodiversity officer, who then consulted with Natural England, the conclusion they came to in terms of this particular application was, well, actually, it's not going to make any difference at all whether the alcohol is sold on board or not. So what I'm suggesting that you do here is that you approach this basically in two parts. You first of all consider whether or not it's appropriate to grant this vessel a license at all. And you'll see that I've set that out in the in page 2 of the response that I've sent to you. In terms of the effect on the licensing objectives, there is no evidence that anybody can point to that will suggest that the sale of alcohol on board would lead to any matter of crime or disorder. It's not going to lead to any public nuisance. As far as the protection of children from harm are concerned, then exactly the same rules would apply with regard to persons under the age of 18 as would apply in any restaurant, bar, off license, and the like. And conditions with regard to operating a Challenge 25 scheme are there. And again, by regulating it, rather than simply allowing people to bring their own booze on board, if I can put it like that, there is a far greater element of control than would otherwise be the case. And with regard to matters of public safety, well, as I've already said, for a vessel such as this to take paying passengers on board, it has to comply with all sorts of marine regulations, and Mr. Malone is going through the process at the moment of ticking all of the other boxes and getting all of the other permissions that are needed. I apologise for calling Elkins Boatyard Elgins. That was a mistake which has gone unnoticed throughout. So thank you for pointing that out. The boatyard is not somewhere where this vessel will be selling alcohol, because two reasons. When it's moored up in the boatyard or on land in the boatyard, then it's not sailing. It's only when the vessel is sailing effectively that you'll be able to supply alcohol. And if it's moored, then it will only be permitted to sell alcohol for off sales and the like when it is moored somewhere on the Christchurch River, and only on a limited number of occasions, and only in effect to support other activities that are happening in the immediate area. If there is something going on in Christchurch town centre or further afield in Ringwood or Bournemouth, that is not going to provide a sufficient excuse for Mr. Malone to suddenly open up a floating off licence. This is very much intended to support local events, and in particular local charities such as the RNLI and things like that. The conditions, I hope, speak for themselves. It is extremely limited in terms of off sales when the vessel is moored. And although we've said a maximum of 12 occasions in any calendar year, the reality of it is that it probably isn't going to be that many. And in addition, you will see that Mr. Malone would have to tell the police and your officers, ma'am, in writing at least a week in advance that that is what he proposes to do, so that they can if appropriate, give advice, are aware of the situation, and the like. Just a couple of other little things that may be of interest to you that is not mentioned in the response, and that is that, as you may have seen, this application has resulted in a fair bit of publicity in the press and the like. And partly as a consequence of that, Mr. Malone has had two approaches from interested parties, one of whom wants to do a TV programme about the food offering, and it is the food offering that is of greater interest than the alcohol. The alcohol is really just ancillary to that. People are going to eat fish or whatever on board. They might like to have a drink to go with it. They're not coming on board to drink. That's not the object of the exercise at all. And the other one, there is a local children's book author called Larry Newman, who is going to use the Margarita next summer in support of her book, Jessie the Jellyfish, which is all about teaching children to keep beaches clean and free of pollutants and plastics and all the rest of it. Mr. Malone himself is a supporter of such initiatives. He's been involved on more than one occasion on Mudderford Sandpit and Haigsbury Head with beach clean initiatives and all that sort of thing, and is very concerned, particularly with regard to the use of plastics and other things that might pollute and cause harm to the local flora and fauna, to support initiatives to make sure that that doesn't happen. Ma'am, in summary, therefore, I commend this application to you. I have to say, as I did at the end of my response, that I was rather surprised at the volume of representations against that. You won't do a number ticking exercise, of course you won't, but I was also rather surprised at just how many people took it upon themselves to write in saying that they thought this was a great idea, and that they completely supported Mr. Malone and what he was trying to do, and thought that it would be of benefit to the locality. And of course, in considering licensing applications, I'm not going to recite your own policy to you, but you'll be aware that you do want to support diversity, inclusion, and all of that sort of thing, with different offerings to enhance and support the local economy, and to provide appropriate entertainment facilities, etc., for the local populace. I would therefore ask that you grant the application as submitted, and I'm here, as is Mr. Malone, to take any questions that you and your colleagues, or indeed those who have attended to object to the application, may have. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Day. Very comprehensive submission. We now move to members' questions. So, members, are there any questions for Mr. Day? Councillor Kelsey?
No, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a few, but as you rightly say, that was a very comprehensive submission from Mr. Day, and he actually clarified a couple of the points that I was looking to ask questions on. So thank you for that, Mr. Day.
Yes, indeed. Councillor Johnson?
No, thank you, Chair. The same as Councillor Kelsey. My questions were answered as they came up.
Okay. I have one which I think both members would have touched on, and it's just, I think it may just be the verbiage, but in the operation schedule MA, it states with regard to how matters will be dealt with. If the vessel is moored to persons boarding the vessel during any charity or other fundraising event, or handed to persons on board other vessels that pull alongside, it's not contextually, grammatically correct. But could you explain, because I think there was a fear amongst the objectors that alcohol would be passed from the vessel over the side to persons who were not. So could you explain this, please?
Yes, I've reflected on that, And what I'm going to suggest is that you delete the words or handed to persons on board other vessels that pull alongside. The point is that any supply of alcohol for consumption anywhere other than on the boat will be an off sale. And the next section deals with off sales and will cover the situation in any event. And therefore, we don't need to have handed to persons on board other vessels that pull alongside, because off sales will only happen when the vessel is moored.
Indeed, and it was a confusion, and I'm sure a concern for our objectors. So just to put their mind at rest. So, Mrs. Hollyoak, do you have that amendment, please?
I do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So, with that point clarified, just pop my glasses on. I'll find them first, just to see if there's any other notes that I made. I think the other one was with regard to a comment that was made. This is a small boat, and any noise generated either by music or just conversation would waft across the water until 11 o'clock 23. Is there an intention that the boat would be coming back at that late hour because of tides, etc., around that area? Knowing the area a little, some of those tidal forces to bring the boat back at that time might be difficult. I was just wondering what the sort of generality might be around that. Maybe Mr. Malone could comment. Thank you.
Yes, please.
We would always aim to be coming back before 11 o'clock. It's not practical to come back in the dark, especially Muddyford. It is tidal. There won't be a set time that it comes back every day due to the tides, but we would have one eye on the sun going down and aim to be in before dark.
That's extremely useful.
Thank you.
We're having a bit of buzz back. That's why I'm having to put my mic on and off, so the poor officers back at headquarters don't get lots of squeaks in their ears. So bear with me. So also another question, please. The exact location of where the Margarita will be moored when she is birthed. Where will she be at the end of each day?
As it stands at the moment, it's at Bailey Bridge for the winter. Discussions are ongoing with the yard owner, Mr. Evely, whether there is room for it to be up there for the whole season. Same with Mr. Elkins at Elkins. Ideally, it would be one or the other. I don't have a definite site for you right now. When it's agreed upon, that information will be passed over.
Thank you. It's useful because I think there's some nervousness amongst our objectors as to where exactly the vessel would be. And another one, because there's some interesting verbiage that's used. What constitutes, with regard to this, an event in close proximity to? Because I think there's some concern around there as to exactly where these events, if they're when you're moored up, where are you going to be, or what's the proximity of where you're going to be, the areas of which you're going to be, because I think concerns around that.
We didn't want to be unduly prescriptive with regard to that, because as Mr. Malone has just explained to you, at the moment the boat doesn't have a long-term permanent mooring. That needs to be resolved, and it is also quite possible that from one season to the other, it may be moored at different places. It may be moored somewhere to overwinter, then somewhere else during the sort of summer months, and when it's out doing its chartering and so on. And from year to year, it may be in a different place. We're aware, and it was something that exercised our minds, that as and when the boat moves to another normal rather than permanent mooring, that notification would have to be given to your officers, so that an amendment could be made to the address on the license. But the point about it really is, as was explained to you right at the very beginning by Mrs. Jardine, the main purpose of that is really to define which local authority the licensing application should be made to. And at the time, it was in Elkins Boatyard, and therefore you were the appropriate authority. Going back to the question of events, different events take place on Christchurch Quay, around the harbour, and things like that. The wording was, if you like, difficult, because I didn't want to deal with it on the basis that an event had to be taking place within 100 metres or 50 metres or something like that. And given that there was the distinct possibility that during a particular event, the boat would be tied up and moored in one place. For a different event, it may be slightly further upstream, downstream, or around the corner, or anything like that. What we simply proposed is that it should be in close proximity to where the vehicle is moored, and to give those words their ordinary English meaning. We all know what close proximity means. So, for example, as I mentioned in my opening, if there is, I don't know, a Christmas market going on in Christchurch town centre, which is, a couple of 100 yards or more away from where the boat is moored, then it's not going to be able to operate the off sales then. It's only basically if something is happening that are going to bring people to the place where the boat actually is, that the off sales will be permitted. And there is also the safeguard to be built in, that if that is something we want to do, then we've got to tell the licensing authority and the police in writing at least 7 days before we do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Day. I think that it is really important that some of this verbiage and the definition of the verbiage with regard to the application is explored, so that objectors do understand exactly what is trying to be said. I think that's very important. Thank you very much for your view and for your definition. That's extremely helpful. And I think the last point was that in some of these submissions, people were concerned with regard to amplified music. Obviously, that hasn't been applied for, so I'm just looking for your assurance that you could state that as such.
No, there is absolutely no intention for this to become a party boat, disco boat, or whatever. There is a technical issue because under the Live Music Act, the consequence of the boat being regarded under the Licensing Act as being premises, despite the fact that it moves around, the Live Music Act basically says any premises that are licensed for the sale of alcohol or supply of alcohol consumption on the premises may provide live recorded music without it being on the license, provided it's between 8 AM and 11 PM, and the vessel is, or the premises at the time are authorised to sell alcohol for consumption on the premises, and provided that there are less than 500 people there. You cannot disapply the Live Music Act on an application for a new licence. It's only once the application has been granted, and if there is then a problem with that, then in those circumstances, an application for review can be made to disapply the Act. But there is absolutely no intention of it having, entertainment on board. The entertainment is the fishing and the eating and the sightseeing. It's not going to be a party boat. That's simply not going to happen. And if it did, well, then you can review the license, and he risks losing the license entirely.
Indeed. The last question which has come to light is just as to where customers are going to disembark, so to speak, trying to keep it marine, where the boat is overnight. So the vessel will come in, it will moor up somewhere, we're not quite sure where, and then passengers will disembark from there. Is that correct? There's no set sort of agreement as to where that will be. It'll be where it can be convenient. I think that there is some concern around objectors wanting to have some continuity as what the boat will be doing on a daily basis.
Well, I think the answer to that is the same as it. The only difference being that if you're minded to grant this license, then alcohol can be supplied on board rather than being brought on board. It may well be that charters will start at Christchurch. It might be Butterford Quay or anywhere else in that locality. But that would simply be for the purpose of embarkation and disembarkation when it's convenient. I mean, it rather depends on, who charters it. If I wanted to charter it for, to take my department at work out for a day as a thank you for their hard efforts, I'd speak to Mr. Malone and we would, agree a pickup point and a disembarkation point, which may well not be the place where it's moored. We would not expect, for example, to be driving to Elkins Boatyard to get on the vessel there.
I think that was the concern. Thank you. So thank you very much. I have no further questions. I'll, of course, return back to our members after we've asked our objectors if they have any questions, if that's okay for you members, unless you, because obviously they'll want to tease absolutely everything out to ensure that we've asked all questions and the debate has been full. Mr. White, your occasion now. Do you have any questions for the applicant, Mr. White? You have the floor.
No, I don't have any questions. I think most of my points will come out in what I have to say.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, barking dog. But I've got a blind dog who can't find the front door. So excuse me if you can hear the dog barking. Councillor Coulton, do you have any questions for Mr. White? Sorry, Mr. Day.
Yes, yes, I do. You can hear me, can you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, good. I'm very nervous about the boat being moored. It seems so vague. Everything seems rather vague. He doesn't know where he's mooring the boat. It could be here and it could be there. It's also, he doesn't know where he's going to moor the boat when he's doing off sales on a charity event. And most of the charity events have their own facilities because that's how they're going to make money. So I don't know that that's relevant. Are you able to answer any of those, or am I just sort of?
No, every question is very relevant, Councillor. Right. Thank you very much for raising it. I'm sure Mr. Day will do his best to answer your question. Mr. Day?
There are two separate things there. The first is, and I go back to what was said at the beginning by Mrs. Jardine. Once the vessel is licensed, then it can operate pretty well anywhere it likes. And you do have a small number of other boats that are licensed in this area, or rather who operate or which operate in this area, particularly further down the coast around Wareham, for example. And yeah, they pick up, disembark in certain places, but they're moored up somewhere else. In terms of the off sales, we've made it very specific that this cannot be a floating off license. He cannot go down to Mudderford, for example, or down to Hengistbury Head or somewhere like that, and drop anchor or tie up and suddenly start selling alcohol to anybody who happens to pass by or anything like that. We've made it specific that it should only be moored or anchored on Christchurch River and not anywhere else. We cannot be specific about precisely where, basically because it's a boat, and all boat yacht owners or whatever, and some may be fortunate to have a permanent mooring that they stay at for as long as they own the vessel in question. Others will decide they want to move from one place to another, quite frequently because the owner of the mooring has whacked the fees up, so they've gone somewhere cheaper or whatever. But we've tried to restrict it as much as we can. It's not going to suddenly turn up tie up against one of the Bournemouth piers or whatever, and try and sell alcohol, do the air festival or something like that. That's not permitted. It's not allowed. If people want to charter it to go and watch the air festival from off Bournemouth Beach or whatever, and enjoy a beer or a wine or whatever whilst they're on board, then they would be able to do that. That's the way it works.
Yes, understood. I think that does give some assurance to Councillor Coulton, because obviously a concern, it's not a floating off licence, and I think you put that very well. And to have that assurance that that is not its use is extremely helpful. Councillor Coulton, are there any further questions? You obviously have your opportunity with regard to your own particular submission to raise matters.
But I don't feel that my question was answered, in the respect that I don't understand why the boat does not have a permanent mooring. This has been going on for some time. Why can't Elkins take it? Why can't Bailey Bridge take it? What are the problems that they're having with getting a secure mooring? I find it very much up in the air.
Okay, I'll ask for that question to be answered, and also ask if Linda Cole, our legal advisor, might have any legal advice as to the pertinence of that question. I will be so advised. Mr. Day, if you'd like to attempt that one first.
Let's forget the licence for one moment. This boat has been moored over the years in different places, but all around this part of the world. And the same applies to any other boat, yacht, whatever it is. They change their moorings from time to time. There is no requirement for it to have a permanent mooring. Indeed, the Act even doesn't use the word permanent in this context. It's where the vessel is normally moored, and that's, as has already been explained, is really for the purpose of determining which licensing authority an application should be made to.
I think that's a very well put, and I think that is the statement, Councillor Coulton, that there's no requirement to have a permanent mooring. For the purposes of this particular application, it's on the Christchurch River, so it needs to come to BCP for permission. If you want to tease that out a little further, Councillor Coulton, because I do understand if you're having some concerns around that, perhaps you'll do that in your submission so we can move on. Are you content? Would that be acceptable?
Yes, well, yes, but I have got another question.
Please pose your next question. Thank you, Councillor Coulton.
Yes. Oh yes, it's the charity events that bother me, and also what the Christchurch River. What is that? Is that the Stour? Is it the Avon? Is it the wider harbour? Or is it going out to sea? Which it would do if you were going fishing. I just find that Christchurch River is a little bit bland.
Fair enough. So there's two questions in there. Thank you very much, Councillor Coulton. Councillor Day? I'm sorry, Mr. Day, you've been elected.
No, that's actually probably not wrong, because I'm not in BCP.
I beg your pardon. There we are. I was right. I was wrong, but I was right. So, Mr. Day, in this instance, could you address the questions? Thank you.
Not a problem. Again, the answer is it rather depends. When we say Christchurch River, yes, we intended to include both of the rivers. And the harbour area, quayside and the like. The main purpose of saying Christchurch there was not to so much give authority for it being in Christchurch, but basically to do the other way round, that you cannot, because it says Christchurch, the Bournemouth piers, for example, Munaford Quay, that's not Christchurch. Therefore, you cannot tie up there and sell alcohol when there is an event going on there. It's only when something is happening basically on the river or the rivers in Christchurch, and the boat is there in association with that. On those rare occasions, it can assist in the fundraising. And in particular, it's already assisted and been involved in an event with the RNLI, for example, which Mr. Malone strongly supports.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Coulton, we will move on. Are you content with that answer?
Well, yes, yes, okay. What was the other one? Oh, what my concern is also that there are a lot with the charity. If the boat is going to be moored midstream, because you won't get a mooring along the Cromp side. If it's going to be moored there, there's a charity event going on the Cromps. What about all the paddle boarders, the other craft that want to get out into the harbour, that want to get out into the sea, and the kayaks and everybody else who has a vessel? That concerns me because it's manic, as you can imagine. Like this summer was absolutely so busy. Paddleboarders don't know the rules of the river, so they're all over the place. And when and you've got the rowing club as well. They do lots of practicing on all the time, day and in the evenings, all through the year. It concerns me that, are we thinking about the safety of other boat users?
Okay, thank you. I think it's well put, and I think actually the answer is fairly simple with regard to health and safety requirements, which would obviously be required, Mr. Day. Can you give assurances there, please, as to how these matters would be panned out with regard to the sails? I doubt that the boat is just going to rock up and ignore these very stringent requirements. So could we have some assurances, please?
No, yes, you certainly can have. You know, the boat is going to have to comply with harbour regulations and all the rest of it at all times. And that applies regardless of whether or not it has a license to sell alcohol on board. I must admit, I do struggle with the idea of the boat being in the middle of the river and dropping anchor, and then it would be anchored rather than moored. But let's not get too bogged down with that. With somebody on a paddle board coming up alongside and saying, "Oh, can I have half a pint of your best bitter?" Or whatever. I mean, with the greatest respect, that is a little far-fetched. And in any event, there is this requirement for Mr. Malone to give police and licensing authority 7 days notice in advance, right? So there's an event going on, or Christchurch Quay or whatever it is, he can't get a mooring, so I'm dropping anchor in the middle of the river. I'm not going to be able to hand anything to anybody on the quay because I'm in the middle of the river. Is he really in those circumstances going to give notice to the police and the licensing authority that that's one of his 12 occasions where, in the hope that some kayakers or paddle boarders may come up alongside and want to drink? I mean, with the greatest respect, that is rather far-fetched and fanciful. We all know what this means. It's, you know, if there is a charity or fundraising event going on, he would like to be part of it and support it, and no doubt make a donation to the good cause that money is being raised for, whatever or whoever that may be.
Thank you, Mr. Day. I am grateful to Councillor Coulton's questions, though, because although you believe they may be far-fetched, they are teasing out every minutiae of detail, which obviously we need to do. So, Councillor Coulton, your questions are well made, and we're very grateful for them. So I'll now move on, if I may. Your good selves, that's yourself and Mr. White. It's now your opportunity to make your submissions, and I will, ladies first. So, Councillor Coulton, you have the floor.
Oh, myself off. Really, my submission is that I do object to, because of my residents. They are worried about the noise that this will. I mean, prove me wrong would be wonderful, and you know, it's a good venture, but I do have to consider my residents and what they've asked me for, and they've asked me to put these facts to you, and all I would hope is that it doesn't. We are going to be asked for other boats to be licensed. I mean, that's a natural course of events. And it worries me that suddenly we're going to have all these licensed boats up and down the river. Well, up and down the river and in the harbour and further. And it does bother me with regards to the Coast Guard and the RNLI, who will be having to save some of these people, which they do all the time anyway, if there is a problem. And I also made a note about being, sorry, how far you're going to be from a safe haven if you do go out into sea. I mean, do you know the category you'll be applying for? Will it be 3 miles, 20 miles? I know I'm doing a submission here, so I can't ask the question, but I'm just wondering where this is going. And that's the end of my submission. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure that we can accommodate the question in there, Councillor Coulton, with regard to the categorisation, although it's rather lost on me because I'm not a great knowledge of this, but I'm sure that can be answered. Perhaps we could look to Mr. Day or Mr. Malone with regard to that.
I'm not a great sailor either, ma'am.
Malone is putting his hand up. Mr. Malone, perhaps you could answer for Councillor Coulton.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
The vessel has been coded for 20 plus years for 60 miles offshore. That's MCA-MGN 280 Class B. Due to the refit, we have to get it resurveyed. There's a number of aspects to that. The first aspect's completed. We're just awaiting the second and the third aspect to go through. But before it can carry passengers, that has to conform to the coding and be coded and insured. So it will be safe for whatever the boat is coded for, be that 10 miles, 60 miles, etc.
Okay, that's a very comprehensive answer. I think the main thing in there is you're going through the formal requirements and you will comply with those fully for the safety of your vessel when you're carrying your passengers, I think, which is what Councillor Coulton, I think, was looking to be assured of, I'm sure. Yes, she's nodding. Bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Coulton, for your submission. You will get an opportunity at the end of further you'd like to add. Okay, and if there is a question in there you still need to ask, do feel free. We're here to tease out everything so everybody has a fair opportunity to air their concerns, especially as you're here. I know as a councillor, and so will my fellow subcommittee members, that you are here to represent your residents, and we totally respect that and thank you for it. Thank you, Councillor Coulton. So Mr. White, you now have the floor. Thank you.
Chair,
Thank you.
I do apologise for interrupting. Chair, can we just check that anybody has got any questions for Councillor Coulton?
Indeed. I was going to actually take back, if that's okay.
I do apologise.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Mrs. Holyoake, not a problem. As we have just two, I thought we could hear both and then there'd be opportunity for questions of. So if everybody. Thank you.
Thank for the time today. I'd like to give some expanded points on the issues of safety and nuisance. But to understand my points, you've really got to understand the context of the application scope. At first glance, and I think we've heard it today when I read it, the application before you today is portrayed as an off sales at 12 charity events a year. That's what it appears to be. And this is really important. If you look closer at the detail of the application, it does cover other activities. And I've taken these from the application and they apply to 12 customers, 365 days a year, between 10 in the morning and 11 at night. Explicitly stated in section L and section M(a). And these are additional.
Sorry, Mr. White, you're drawing our attention to where?
L and M(a). And
that's on the operating schedule. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And the following things I'd like to highlight are, and I would stress, additional to off sales during the 12 charity events. In section L, there's a very high level description of fee paying guests, friends and family of the owner. But section MA, and we touched on this earlier, does cause some issues, particularly when you start to look at safety and nuisance. As written, it's not just fishing, it's chartered leisure trips. It then goes on, if the vessel is moored, alcohol can be handed to persons on board the other vessel that pulls alongside. So it's nothing to do with charity. Anyone boarding the vessel during a charity or other fundraising event can have alcohol. And it's explicitly stated that these are additional to the 12 off-licence days. So let's just turn to safety. The licence is being considered in the context of Elkins. You know, that's where the premises are. It's full of hazards, welding, grinding, cranes, tractors, but there's no plan offered to keep customers away in that yard or any other yard, and people would get on. In any boatyard, particularly Elkins, people have to get on the boat. There is a bridge, a walkway to a pontoon, and then you've got to climb over the boat's high side. And this could be in the dark and rain as well. No plan for how that's to be done safely. Now we turn to away from Elkins or any other boatyard. It's very hard to make because it's undefined where the boat will be moored. The Christchurch River doesn't exist. As we heard from Councillor Coulton, we've got the rivers Avon, Stour and the harbour. But how far and how downstream would the vessel be moored in that area? Not defined. Mooring alongside is dangerous, especially in the dark. Again, vagueness in the application. There's no limit to their sizes or how many people these other boats can carry. There is a danger of navigation in Christchurch narrow channels. There's no plan how the police or emergency services will get to the vessel when moored away from Elkins. There's no police launch, and the council's harbour patrol is rarely deployed. Turning to nuisance, I'm not a lawyer, but I did look it up. Nuisance is caused when someone affects another person's use of land or of some other right that is connected with that land. And I'll give some examples of what would be unavoidably caused by this application. Elkins is 300 metres from the public highway. There are 3 private roadways that have to be passed over to get to the mooring. 50 homes are going to be affected by potentially 12 customer cars and 2 cars for the crew. And it's a very quiet area. Elkins is also locked during normal working hours. How are these people to get through a locked gate outside normal working hours? There's going to be noise, people trying to get, essentially their cars, up to 14, could be parked on private property. Now let's turn away from Elkins. Mooring alongside is only possible if the boat complies with one of 3 conditions. It's anchored, it's attached to a mooring buoy, or it's tied to a bank. Those 3 properties are not owned by the applicant, and the owners of those properties, the riverbank, the mooring buoy or the riverbed, would be unable to use the full enjoyment of their property. This by definition is nuisance. And if the applicant stopped the owners using their property, that would move on to a condition for trespass. The rivers and harbour travels over the water, and there are many houses built along the harbour and riverbanks. Customers on the boat are not enclosed, so there will be stray noise up to 11 at night. So to summarise, it's in my opinion that the scope of the application is too vaguely and too widely defined, and if granted would unavoidably create safety and nuisance problems. Importantly, I believe the scope far exceeds fishing trips and the proposed 12 days of off-licence sales at charity events. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. White. So now moving on to questions of the previous speakers or by other members. So firstly, we see any questions for Councillor Coulton in the first instance?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay, and any questions for Mr. White?
No, Chair. Some of the points he raised, I'm sure, will be answered by Mr. Day. There were some points there that I think Mr. Day will be quite happy to clarify, and that will satisfy any questions that I would have had on those occasions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelsey. Yes, I think by way of placing a question, Mr. Day can assist us in some of those anomalies which have arisen from both our other persons who in their submissions. Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson, do you have any questions for Councillor Coulton?
No, Chair, not at this time. For neither objector, same as Councillor Kelsey. I think they'll be covered in the future submissions.
Yes. We try to keep to a process, but obviously if a question does something which Mr. Day, as the applicant's representative, feels he can address, then of course we're here to debate and to make sure that all those areas are covered. So this is a process we are meeting forward, but obviously if a question is needed to be answered, then please do feel free so to do it. So moving forward then, are there any questions, Mr. Day, of Councillor Coulton or Mr. White? Thank you.
Councillor Coulton, other than to thank her for coming and expressing her concern. I've got one question for Mr. White.
Thank you.
Mr. White, all the various points that you've made with regard to nuisance, public safety and all the rest of it, can we just imagine, for the purposes of this question, that the licence application has been refused, and instead what's actually happening is that people who are chartering this vessel and so on are bringing their own wine, beer, gin and tonic, whatever it is, with them when they go to embark on the boat. In terms of the comments that you've made about public safety in Elkins, in terms of nuisance where the boat is moored or anything like that, wouldn't all of those things still apply equally if the situation was that people were bringing their own?
Can I answer that question?
Yes, of course you can, Mr. White. This is your opportunity to do so. Mr. White, you have the floor.
I need to discuss an application for a licence for alcohol. We're not here to discuss what might or might not happen outside of the application.
Thank you very much.
Discussion is just about
thank you for your answer. Yeah, thank you for your answer. I think the issues that sit in here are, there were some concerns that you raised about people causing nuisance while accessing the vessel. So I think when in summation, please, I'd be grateful, Mr. Day, if you would ensure to cover these points so that we have a clear understanding. I'm not quite sure of Mr. White's line of questioning here, but I'm always open to be advised. But I would have thought the boat would have been moored on one of Stour of the Harbour. It not being Christchurch River now, we've established there is no such naming. But I would imagine the boat is moored on the at some mooring along there. It would not be in the boatyard. I believe it would be in the boatyard if it were there to be cleaned at some stage or having some functionality performed upon it. But passengers would not be expected to be getting on and off it in the boatyard. So I think there's some confusion there, certainly for me. Mr. White, one moment, please. I'm actually speaking. Thank you. I'll invite you a moment. I wonder, Mr. Day, whether you could clarify that.
Right. Two things with regard to that. If you are, as I suggested at the outset, the first question was whether it should be licensed at all. And if it should be licensed, then to consider this issue of off sales. And if you think that in principle that's okay, you can either grant this application subject to the conditions that we've offered, or proposed, or you can write your own conditions. So if, for example, you think that instead of saying Christchurch Dorset River, it should be defined as by naming the rivers and including the harbour, quayside, or whatever, or not, as the case may be, then you are at liberty to do so. But certainly, Elkins Boatyard isn't part and parcel of that. And in any event, I think it's somewhat unlikely, to put it mildly, that there would be any charity or other fundraising event taking place sufficiently close to Elkins Boatyard to justify off sales from there. And why would anybody want to do it? It is clear that, and it's a condition, that the provision of alcohol shall be ancillary to the vessel's main use as a pleasure boat for fishing trips and or charter. And it's principally going to be fishing trips, as we all know, and that's a condition. It cannot simply become a floating bar or a floating pub. That's not the way it's going to work. And the comparison made between L and M, hours the premises are open to the public, you're supposed to specify. Well, it's not open to the public, it's a private boat. It's not like a public house or an off license. Members of the public will not be able to wander in and off it willy-nilly or whatever. It is a statement of fact. It's privately owned, it's not open to the public, but only to either fee-paying guests or friends and family of the owner. They're the only people who'll be allowed on board. And again, this business about off sales, if you just look at the pictures of the boat, right, and let's imagine that there is some big event going on the quay, and Mr. Malone has been lucky enough to get a mooring and wants to sell some alcohol for consumption off the premises. You're not going to get a queue of people coming onto the boat. That's not a practical proposition. They're going to have to be handed it from the boat to take it away to drink it somewhere else. It's limited by its size and everything else.
Thank you, Mr.
I hope that answers the question.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Day. Very, very helpful for our other persons. I would advise our other persons, if they have anything further they wish, please do put that in your final summaries. We are open to listening to your further comments, all very important to us. So that said, then we are at the stage where all parties are given an opportunity to sum up. And thank you for your patience, Councillor Coulton. We will start with you. You have the floor, Councillor Coulton.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am. Friends and guests of the boat vessel, surely you're not going to charge friends and guests money to buy drink. Surely that would be free. You've invited them onto your boat, and so you wouldn't say, well, you know, you've got to buy yourself a beer. But they could bring their own drinks on board, which won't be allowed. A premise, if you get the license, it would be a premises. So that to me is a little strange. In fact, I find the whole. I just don't feel we're getting to the bottom of this in the respect that I feel there's something else that I can't put my finger on going on. And it's no good, Councillor Kelsey, shaking your head. I've seen the way you're going, so I know. But I do say that I just don't think that at the moment it's a viable proposition and should not be granted a licence. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. With respect, if any member feels as matters go through that they may agree with the point or they may not agree with the point, that certainly doesn't give any inference as to their final decision. So please don't be concerned about that. It may be that there's just a point which is not agreed with, or is agreed with at the moment in time, but it's certainly not their final decision, because that's obviously taken kind of with everything concerned. So please don't be put off by anybody perhaps shaking a head or nodding. I do it myself. Thank you, Councillor Coulton. So the opportunity now is for Mr. White. You have the floor for your summation.
Thank you. I have to take the application at face value. It was prepared and submitted by the applicant's solicitor, who's experienced and qualified in this area. I therefore respectfully what he's meant, and what he's written causes me concern on safety and nuisance issues. There was also a comment about the application says that people will be boarding and unboarding at Elkins, okay, and they will also be moored at Elkins, so they will be part of the premises at Elkins. So I don't think we can just discard the comments about Elkins. The context in Elkins is important because it's the normal place of mooring of this vessel. Okay, it just can't be put to one side. Recommend to the committee that they refuse this application on safety and nuisance grounds in the context of what is written in the application.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. White, and sure we'll take those comments under due consideration. Thank you very much for your summation and for your questions earlier, and also questions from Councillor Coulton at an earlier stage. Mr. Day, you have the floor with regard to your summary.
I'm going to try and be extremely brief. I start really as, I end as I started. The question you really need to ask yourself here is it going to make any difference if Mr. Malone is allowed to sell beer, wine, ciders, whatever, on his boat, vessel, as opposed to letting people bring on their own unlimited copious quantities? And the answer is yes, of course it's going to make a difference. It's going to make things an awful lot better because you can control it and you can condition it, etc. The entire purpose of the license is to regulate a legal activity. And all the other matters are really nothing to do with the simple question here, which is, should he be allowed to supply alcohol on board? If somebody comes round to my house, they can bring their own beer with them and drink it. I can give them a beer from my fridge or a bottle of wine from my wine rack. What I can't do is to charge them for it. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. And exactly the same applies to Mr. Malone. What he would like to be able to do is to charge people if he provides them an alcoholic drink on board. He can already charge people if they want a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or a lemonade or a bottle of fizzy water or whatever. Somewhat ironically, if you grant him a license, he won't be allowed to charge them for ordinary still water. He'll have to provide that free of charge. No license, he can charge them for bottled water. It is, I think, I don't mean this disrespectfully, it is a bit of a storm in a teacup, this. It is really quite a harmless application that is not going to cause anybody any difficulty, and it will enhance the offering that Christchurch, charming as it already is, particularly around the quay and so on. And if you think that my wording is tightening up, then please feel free to do it. You know the immediate area of Christchurch probably rather better than I do, as I live 10 miles up the road across the border in Hampshire. But I invite you, whatever else you do, to grant him the license and to allow him to support some of these charitable events and so on and so forth on these rare occasions by letting him sell some alcohol when that's happening and he's tied up wherever it is on one or other of the Christchurch rivers or harbour. Unless you have any other questions, thank you very much for your patience and time, ma'am, and your colleagues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Day. So finally, Mr. Malone, I always invite the applicant at the end of debate if they have anything that they would like to add. You don't feel you have to say something, but if you'd like to add something, the subcommittee would be very happy to hear from you. Mr. Malone?
I have nothing more to say. I think Philip summed it up well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for that long debate. And I will now conclude the hearing, and we will retire, and the subcommittee will adjourn in private with our legal advisor and our clerk, and we will deliberate. The notification subcommittee decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, which is today, 2022. Notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I will ask our legal advisor, please, Mrs. Cole, if she would kindly explain the right of appeal now for us. Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Thank you, Chair. To whatever decision is made today, that appeal should be made within 21 days, a formal notification of the decision, and will be made to Dorset Magistrates Court. Any detail about appeal will be in the notification letter that you receive, and that appeal can be made by anyone that has made representations or the applicant himself. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Cole. So we will now end the meeting, and subcommittee members will take a short adjournment, and we'll reconvene at 11:45 for our next hearing. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your contributions, and subcommittee will of course take them into all due consideration with regard to our decision. And thank you and good morning to you. Good morning, everybody, and you're very welcome to this morning's subcommittee hearing, November the 24th, 2022. We have a substantive, which is item 6, which is an application to vary the premises licence at DYMK, which is 31 Pool Hill, Bournemouth. An application has been received to vary the premises licence for the premises known as DYMK 31 Pool Hill, Bournemouth. And this matter is brought before the licensing subcommittee for its determination. And I will ask firstly for everybody involved to introduce themselves. I will start with myself. My name is Councillor Jude Butt. I am the chairman of the licensing committee, and I am elected as chair of this subcommittee for the purposes of today's business. And my ward is Creekmore, Hilborn and Waterloo. Councillor Johnson, if you'd like to introduce yourself, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, ward member for this subcommittee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kelsey. Oh dear, we lost Councillor Kelsey.
You're on mute, Dave.
Sorry, people. Councillor Kelsey, board and member of this subcommittee and vice chair of the licensing committee.
Thank you very much. It's very easily done. Do remember to unmute yourselves when you're talking. Thank you, Councillor Kelsey. And for the applicant, Mr. Warren.
Hello, Chair. My name is Piers Warren from TLT Solicitors, and I represent Green King, who are the premises licence holders here. You'll see Sean Mitchell is on the call. He is the operator, so I'm representing Green King and the operator here today, and he'll be able to answer any questions you have.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you. I'll be asking you to make the presentations, and of course we can ask questions of Mr. Mitchell if we so wish. So, Mr. Mitchell, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. My name's Sean Mitchell, and I'm the operator and tenant of DYMK Bar.
Thank you very much. We don't have Mr. Ailing with us from Green King, but he was joining us, but he's unable to. And now we move on to our represented authorities and other persons. So we have Mr. Hill.
Good morning, Chair. It's Andy Hill, Senior Environmental Health Officer for BCP Council.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. And we have Miss Mary Allen.
I've just got to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Mary. Sorry about that. I'm a resident of the 23 West Hill Road.
Thank you very much, Miss Allen. Thank you, dear. And we have Mr. Blackburn.
Yeah, hi, I'm here, also a resident at 23 West Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Blackburn. And we have Miss Cole.
Hi everyone, I'm the property West Hill and sort of here on behalf of the landlords as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Hill. And we move to our officers. We have Mrs. Jardim.
Thank you, Chair. Tanya Jardine, licensing officer, who dealt with this application.
Thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Good morning. It's Linda Cole, the legal morning.
Thank you, Mrs. Cole. And Mrs. Hollyoak.
Good morning, Jill Hollyoak, clerk to the subcommittee.
And we also have with us Kieran Clark, who is from our Democratic Services Office, and he's observing today for training purposes. And you're very welcome, Kieran. So just to make a check then that all persons who have given notice of their intention to speak have been identified, and anyone who wishes to withdraw, please do so now and indicate. I see no indication, so we are all content. So I'll run through our proposed order of speaking for our hearing, and the licensing officer will present her report. The applicant will then make their application. There'll be questions of the applicant by all party, and members of the subcommittee will take those questions first. Responsible authorities and other persons can then make their representations. The questions of the responsible authorities and other persons, members of the, and all parties will then be given an opportunity to sum up with the party who spoke last to go first. I'll then conclude our hearing, and the subcommittee will deliberate in private with our legal advisor and our clerk. A notification of the subcommittee's decision will be given within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations. And that is today, 24th of November, Thursday, 2022. And the notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. So I just ask, please do follow that procedure. So, Mr. Warner, you content?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
And Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hill?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
Ms. Allen?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Mr. Blackburn?
Thank you, yes.
And Miss Cole?
Thank you, yes.
Mrs. Cole?
Thank you. Yes, Chair.
And Mrs. Jardim?
Yes, Chair, thank you.
That's very good, thank you. So finally, I just remind all parties speaking not to repeat the information which they've already shared with the subcommittee and all other parties, but to expand on their written representations, please. And all questions to be asked through me as the chairman, and no cross-examinations of party. Please don't be tempted. So now we move on then to our hearing, and Mrs. Jardim, if you'd like to put forward your case, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the matter before you today is to consider an application to vary the premises licence at DYMK, situated at 31 Fort Hill, Bournemouth. Application was submitted by TLT Solicitors on behalf of Green King Retailing Limited on the 3rd of October 2022. The application made is to vary the layout and design of the premises in accordance with the plan attached to the application, and to update the current licence conditions by way of additional conditions and the removal of others. These conditions are set out in the application, which is attached at Appendix 2 to my report. In addition, the applicant seeks to extend the hours for the supply of alcohol, films, live music, recorded music, and anything of a similar description, and late night refreshments from 0100 hours until 0300 hours on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and the opening hours from 0130 to 0400 on Wednesday and Thursdays, and on all non-standard timings. The Licensing Office received 6 representations against the application from other persons and 1 from BCP Council's Environmental Health Officer, on the grounds that the grant of this application would undermine the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. The representations received are in respect of the extension of hours and not in respect of the conditions proposed or the variation to the layout of the premises. Mediation took place between the applicant's solicitor and Dorset Police, and some of the conditions offered by the applicant on their application were discussed and amended. These are mentioned in my report, but to clarify, they are: at least 2 door supervisors shall be employed at the premises from 2200 hours until close on any night the premises operates beyond 0100 hours. Bottle bins shall be provided at the exit doors, and no vessels to be removed from the premises. Should the licence be granted, these conditions will form part of the licence. We received no representations from any of the other responsible authorities. Following the consultation period, the applicant has offered to reduce the hours initially applied for the licensable activities to 0200 hours on a Wednesday and Thursday, and the opening hours to 0300 hours on a Wednesday and Thursday, to allow for a gradual dispersal. This is an hour less than what was initially applied for. Members are asked to consider whether to grant this application, and should the licence be granted, the applicants fail to operate in accordance with their licence and any conditions attached to it, they will be aware that any responsible authorities or other persons may request a review of the licence at any time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Jardim. So now we have questions from everybody on points of fact with regard to Mrs. Jardim's report. So, Councillor Kelsey, do you have any questions on points of fact?
Just a point of clarification so that everyone be aware of what is going on. The reduction in the hours to 0200, am I presuming correctly that that is the reduction in music, etc., until 2 o'clock? If that could just be clarified for the benefit of everyone in the room, please. Yes, thank you. It's a very helpful question, Councillor Kelsey. Could we have clarification on that, please, Mrs. Jardim?
Yes, thank you. So this has come from the witness statement from Mr. Mitchell, where he has offered that all the licensable activities that had initially applied for up until the 0300 hours would be changed to 0200 hours. So it's all licensable activities, and then the closing time is an hour less than what they applied for. Does that answer your query?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
thank you very much, Ms Jardine. That's most helpful. Thank you.
And thank you for raising that, because it does give a clear confirmation there. It's not always easy to decipher these things, especially members of the public. Thank you very much, Councillor Kelsey. Councillor Johnson.
No questions on point of fact, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr. Warren.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I have Mr. Hill.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Miss Allen.
At the moment, thank you.
It's just struggling with your microphone. It is.
Sorry about that.
No problems. Mr. Blackburn.
No questions, thank you.
And Miss Cole.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now's an opportunity for the applicant, and the applicant's agent, Mr. Warren, will be making representation. So, Mr. Warren, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And first of all, can I start with an apology? If you hear a crying baby, then my daughter's at home today, and my office is right next door. So I'll apologise. My partner is trying very hard to keep her quiet.
The beauty of remote hearings, it's all very human, which is all very nice. I've got a very small blind dog on my lap. You can't see her, but she's there. So that's absolutely fine. Go ahead, Mr. Warren. Go ahead.
she had her jabs this morning, so she's unusually grumpy, I'm afraid.
Bless her.
She and Mr. Ayling, on behalf of Green King, sent his apologies as well. He was tied up in a meeting, has tried to make it, but cannot. So that's that done and out the way. The introduction and the summary of the application was very, very helpful, and actually saves me a lot of time and effort, just so that we can go through and for the residents as well as anyone else, the witness statement that hopefully everyone's seen from Sean Mitchell indicates that the change in the hours is for all activities to 2 AM, with a long winding up period till 3, and I'll explain why that's quite important in this case in a minute. Whilst there are 3 parts to this application, the minor layout changes no one's obviously objected to, as your officer said. The conditions obviously should be taken into account with the hours, insofar as obviously this is a very robust new operating schedule. So that in and of itself, I submit, promotes the licensing objectives for what is now a very small application, effectively 1 hour on 2 nights of the week for licensable activities. So those two actually are intertwined insofar as you grant the hours and a very robust operating schedule. My submission will be that will actually promote the objective. All of those conditions, if anyone's interested in reading through them, can be found at pages 170 to 172, and they are a robust operating schedule with the 2 amended conditions that you'll have seen agreed with the police.
Mr. Warren, I
Yes.
got in there as before you drew breath. I managed to get in. Can we just be certain, please, that all our members, subcommittee members, are aware of the supplementary paper, which indeed so are we all in keeping of this, subcommittee members? It is supplementary paper agenda item 6. I hope the members of the public also have reference to that. Thank you, Mr. Warren. You have the floor back.
And certainly wise to confirm that before I launch in. I don't intend to actually spend much time on that statement. It speaks for itself, and obviously, as your instruction, I'll simply amplify some points from it when the time is right. A little bit about DYMK. Sean's a very experienced operator. He leases the premises from Green King, and Green King support him wholeheartedly in the operation that he's run there for a significant period of time, which, given the ups and downs for the license trade over the past number of years, is no mean feat in and of itself, and says a lot about the operation and how much regard and esteem he is held in by his customers. He's been running the premises for 12 years, incidentally. And those 12 years have seen a real change in the area, you know, better than I, and obviously Sean knows very well. The number of venues that support the LGBTQ plus community in the area has diminished greatly, and to the extent that he's one of the last there. It does provide very much a safe environment for people who would identify as other than straight, I think is the best way I can put it, and their straight friends. You know, no one is excluded from the venue, but I think the actual phraseology is all genders or none. Genders or none. Thank you very much.
Genders
Thank
or
you very
none.
much,
I think if we keep to that, then we are content with that definition. Thank you.
I'm happy with that. I deal with a lot of that work in these different environments, and everyone has their own preferred way of referring. So I always try and support whatever anyone wants to go with. He employs on a busy night 7 bar staff, a manager, a bar supervisor, glass collector, and up to 3 door supervisors. So this is a managed premises, a large number of staff to supervise customers. And indeed, since the service of the noise abatement notice that you'll have seen referred to in the statement of Mr. Hill, the courtyard has been used for smoking only. It's not used for any other purposes for customers. And the doors are on self-closers. The speakers are modelled and moved so that there aren't speakers that would face out towards those doors. And it is usually supervised on nights where there are door supervisors by a door supervisor on that door to manage the external area. Currently on a Wednesday and Thursday, these are the nights we're talking about in this application. Sean can have up to 100 people or so in his premises at closing, many to stay and continue their night out, preferably at DYMK, but currently if they do choose to carry on their nights, they leave DYMK, they pass under the windows of the apartments on Pool Hill, which are not directly above the premises, by the way. Directly above us are apartments that are owned by Green King, and Sean's staff, I think, use those. So they pass under the windows, they go to the Dancing Jug, they leave from the Dancing Jug when that closes, and then go past and to the taxi rank opposite DYMK. So in effect, therefore, by keeping people in this premises, we're stopping 2 points where there could be potential disturbance for those neighbours who live on Pool Hill by them simply walking under the windows to go somewhere else and then walking back again. And so the application serves a number of ends and achieves a number of ends. First of all, it allows customers to remain at a place where they feel safe and secure. The long wind down period actually works very well here insofar as customers can wait inside for taxis. With the taxi rank opposite, they get to observe that. Lots of customers get taxis home for their own reasons of personal safety rather than walking. So actually that long period will assist there. Lots of taxi drivers incidentally comment to Sean and his team that they like serving customers from his premises, and that taxi rank is well serviced. It prevents the 2 further points of disturbance, as I've just discussed, and the updated operation schedule speaks for itself in terms of promoting the objectives. You'll see that there was a letter with Sean's statement from Born Free, who I'm sure you're all aware of as an organisation, and that sets out why this application in particular supports the customers and the people that they support as their charity. There are some representations here. They fall into 3 groups really. There's an environmental protection representation, there's some residents reps, and then there's some owners of properties representations. I just want to deal with those very quickly, amplifying some of the comments that are made. Mr. Hill's representation, I'm sure he'll discuss it, but there's nothing in the representation in the papers that identifies or evidences music outbreak from DYMK. He talks about venues in general and complaints about venues in general, but that doesn't really assist here, I'm afraid. On the 25th of October 2021, he visited the premises to discuss, I think, a number of premises and complaints that had been in the area, and recognised that there might have been a duct which was in the former kitchen in DYMK that led out into the courtyard that could have been causing some noise outbreak. That was immediately fixed. Mr. Hill has been invited back to see those works. Obviously he's very busy, and there's no criticism, by the way, and he's got a lot on his plate. But I think it's very fair to say that since that visit, there have been no complaints from Mr. Hill to Sean or his team until we saw the representation come in. So that's a period of over a year. And my submission is that obviously wouldn't indicate serious concerns about the operation going forward if there are no complaints to it for a period of a year there. In the interim, Sean has provided Mr. Hill with video evidence showing music outbreak from another premises. I'm not here to criticise anyone else, but there are speakers in the garden there. There's video evidence that's been provided to Mr. Hill showing that the noise outbreak is coming from another source of music. And indeed, it's fair to say that complaints started to Sean at the time that what used to be, I think, a Mexican restaurant became Tate's and then became the Dancing Jug, and speakers going outside at that point. Sean will continue to work with and will, as I'll make submissions in a minute, work with any residents who want to work with him to ensure that his premises doesn't cause any nuisance. But I think it's also fair to say that there have been some misconceptions about where noise nuisance might be coming from that we do need to address. In the statement of Sean, you'll see an email from Andy Proctor. It's at page 6 of the statement. He lives above the premises on the Pool Hill side, and he is adamant that the noise comes from, it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's not from DYMK. That's the important point from this hearing, and he makes that statement in his email that we've attached to the papers. There are 2 representations you'll have seen from Hunnings Homes, and I think Hannah is here today, so she'll be able to speak to it. Tom met Sean, so her colleague Tom met Sean on the 9th of November and discussed the nature of the applications. They're detailed in Sean's statement of paragraph 7, but let's just talk about some of those points very quickly. There was a complaint about bottle bins being emptied late at night, which is one of the most obnoxious noises, frankly, anyone can hear. I've experienced it myself where I live in Bristol. Those bins categorically are not being emptied by DYMK. They have individual bins for each day that are emptied once a week on a Wednesday into the main bin, which is on wheels, which is then wheeled through and out onto the street, where it is then collected and the bins are wheeled back in on the Thursday. That's on West Hill Road. 7 other bins go through the same communal hallway, which are the flat bins at the back. And you'll have seen deliveries through the back. The only delivery is once a week beer, once a week maximum. It's usually once every 2 weeks. Customers do not use the West Hill Road walkway. It is a fire escape, but it's not used by customers. But we've agreed with Tom that they've got security cameras, we have security cameras. If there are complaints about people going through there, we can try and help them identify who those people are, where they're coming from. But we're adamant and pretty sure that it's certainly not customary. So in short, we've agreed to keep working with Tom and Hannah going forward to try and help identify where the bottle bin noises are coming from, who's storing the bins, etc. And you'll see that detailed in the statement. There are 2 reps from the flat owners, HDM Leisure, but they disclose no evidence of issues. And then we have 3 representations from residents. Mr. Edwards, who I don't believe is on this call, did in fact approach Sean several years ago about doing some soundproofing, or Sean paying for the soundproofing works for him on his flats and developments. The offer was politely declined on the basis that there'd never been any complaints directly from the flats themselves since 2010, and there's been no direct contact since. And Ms. Allen and Mr. Blackburn are here and we'll be able to talk to you about their representations and what they say. But as you'll have seen from Mr. Blackburn's list concerns, a lot of those were addressed in the meeting with Tom, so there's no need for me to go through all of those again. There are a significant number of late night premises in the vicinity: Vaults, Dancing Jug, Canvas. There are other pubs and premises as well, Goat and Tricycle and Brew House. So there are people on the streets where some of these interferences could be coming from. I think it's probably fair to say that there have been assumptions made about noise coming from DYMK that certainly with bottle bins and music outbreak can be identified as coming from elsewhere. And as I say, Sean is very happy to work with these people, make his details available to Mr. Blackburn, to Ms. Allen, to anyone else who wants to deal with him and try and help sort these problems out. We're not saying there might not be problems, we're just saying the source is likely to be elsewhere. Sean has operated a couple of 10s this year, 5th of July to 5 AM, Halloween for 2 nights to 4 AM without any complaints. So there is, if you like, precedent and evidence of being able to manage events later, and obviously they have the later license Fridays and Saturdays anyway. So, Chair, that's my submission, and on the basis of that, I'm going to submit that the application is granted as amended, so with just the 1 hour extension on the Wednesdays and Thursdays, and the conditions as amended with the police. I'd invite you to ask any questions you have at that stage.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Warren. So that said, and with reference to those offered conditions, which could I just ask Mrs. Hollyoak, our licensing officer, if you would just clarify those conditions again, please, for the purposes of completeness. Thank you, Mrs. Jardim.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, conditions agreed by the police or all the conditions?
The conditions offered with regard to the change of hours by the applicant. I believe Wednesday and Thursday 2 to 3, but if you could clarify those, thank you.
Yes, so initially they had applied for the licensable activities, and that is for the supply of alcohol. So I'm just trying to find the regulated entertainment. So supply of alcohol, films, live music, recorded music, anything of a similar description, and late night refreshments. Initially it was 0300 hours, but they have now agreed to reduce that to 0200 hours on a Wednesday and Thursday. And the opening hours they had initially requested to be 0400 hours, and they've now offered to reduce that to 0300 hours on a Wednesday and Thursday, and on all non-standard timings.
And that was with regard to dispersal. Yeah.
Yes, that's
okay.
to allow for dispersal.
Really helpful. Thank you very much indeed. So with that then covered, thank you, Mrs. Jardim. We move on to questions of our applicant, Mr. Warren. So members, any questions? Councillor Johnson.
No questions at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Kelsey?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Now, I'm the same. We had a very comprehensive submission there. I will wait to hear, I think, from others, which we can hopefully tease out any minutiae of detail that we'd need to. So, Miss Allen, do you have any questions for Mr. Warren? Okay, thank you. Mr. Hill?
I've got no questions at present, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Blackburn?
I haven't as such, but there are some points within the statement that I want to contest. But I assume that I would do that during my, during my representation. Is that correct?
That's fine, Mr. Blackburn. Yes, we'd be happy to hear those then.
Okay, thank you. Then no questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Miss Cole?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's an anomalous situation because we've heard from the applicant. I very much want to hear from our responsible authority with regard to some of those issues which our applicant has raised, and then I think that we would be able to have a further line of questioning. So it may be that we might come back to you, Mr. Warren, with regard to some questions. I'm sure you'll suffer us gladly with regard to that for members and for anybody else, of course. So. Thank you. So moving on then, it's an opportunity now for responsible authorities and other persons to put forward their representations. So I'll look to our responsible authorities first, and I'll ask Mr. Hill, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. So may I preface my submission by saying that us as an environmental health team pride ourselves on working proactively with businesses to resolve matters such as this, which comes before you today, in a timely and amicable manner so as to avoid the need to attend such hearings. We acknowledge that these are both costly in terms of time and have a financial implication on the businesses, should they require legal representation as they've chosen to do today. This is more relevant when we consider the challenges that many of our businesses have faced in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the current cost of living crisis, which is affecting many of the established businesses in Bournemouth. In our daily interactions with businesses, we are finding that many are impacted by the recent energy price increases in the cost of borrowing, and increased wage costs. We historically have worked with businesses to provide advice and support on any proposals to increase these hours of operation, which may increase the profitability of their businesses, working closely with these operators to ensure that the impact of any proposed changes would not adversely affect local residents. We have in the past worked with this particular business to provide assistance with a problem relating to noise transmission into the external smoking area, which I believe was referred to in Mr. Mitchell's statement, and his solicitor has kindly reminded us of that. We have also provided advice on how this particular business would comply with a noise abatement notice, which this department served upon the premises in 2019, when an authorized officer accompanied by myself witnessed excessive noise emanating from this venue and affecting the residents overlooking the rear smoking area. I acknowledge the important role DYMK in particular play in the community. The solicitor acting on behalf of the applicant has kindly provided a letter of support from the charity Born Free, where they have outlined their belief that DYMK offers a safe environment for the LGBTQ+ community, where reference is made to individuals who leave this establishment upon closing and visit other bars where they feel less safe and raise concerns about inclusion. As the Equality and Diversity representative for the Environmental Health team, as well as the Community Service, I am more aware than most of the importance of officers making decisions which may adversely affect the LGBTQ+ community in Bournemouth. Therefore, Chair, it's not without thorough consideration of these facts that I've come to you today to make this representation against this proposal to increase the permitted hours of operation for DYMK. It's hoped that during this hearing today, local residents affected by noise from this establishment will outline their particular concerns with this proposal, and I will indeed take the opportunity to outline my concerns I have regarding noise from this venue affecting residents, once I've outlined the application and how this relates to neighbouring commercial businesses, many of which are subject to similar complaints, as the solicitor has kindly pointed out. This application, as we know, is to extend the hours for films, live music, recorded music, or anything of a similar description, and late night refreshment until 0200. The following morning on a Wednesday and Thursday, and these activities are currently permitted to 0100. It's to extend the premises operating hours until 0400 hours the following morning on a Wednesday and Thursday, and this additional hour has been included to assist in dispersal. We'll be aware that obviously in the previous application, a further hour was applied for. In considering the application, the applicant has offered no additional conditions in relation to the control of noise. In fact, the current prevention of public nuisance conditions attached to the existing license have not even been included on the application. I assume this was simply just an oversight. I've considered the neighbouring premises, namely Canvas.
Sorry, Mr. Hill, could you just say that again? Because if there's been some exclusion, then I'll ask our officer if she could pull it up so we are aware, because obviously we would need to be aware that they are in fact there. So thank you for that note. So Mrs. Jardim, could you do that? But could you just repeat what you've said about what is missing or you believe to be missing?
The applicant has offered no additional conditions in relation to the control of noise. So in fact, and the current prevention of public nuisance conditions attached to the existing license have not been included on the application. So when we look at the application, all the conditions were offered. However, for some reason, the prevention of nuisance conditions were not added.
Okay, so if what we're saying is we're uncertain as to whether they exist or not, but they just haven't existed, yeah, or whether they don't exist.
They do exist. I've seen the license. They do exist. So I assume this was simply an oversight.
But the subcommittee won't have seen this, Mr. Hill. If you're saying it's not on the application of papers which we've had, then we are not aware that they are indeed as stated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Chair.
Yes.
I might be able to assist.
Sorry, who's speaking?
It's Piers from TLT.
Yes, Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner.
So we asked to remove some conditions from the license, which were going to be replaced anyway. What we didn't do was ask to remove any of the conditions under the current prevention of public nuisance heading on the current license. So they exist anyway. We're not looking to remove those. They are just to remain.
Sorry, I had some alarm there where it sounded as if they was making an application for those to have been removed, but obviously not. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Hill. If you'd like to continue, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Wan. I've considered the neighbouring premises, namely Canvas, the Vault, and the Dancing Jug, a premises which this applicant appears to refer to in their submissions to the subcommittee. I've considered the permitted hours of these venues. The Vault and Canvas benefit from a 24-hour license, and the Dancing Jug with more restrictions on their permitted hours and more robust licensing conditions in respect to noise, and the restrictions on the use of their external smoking area. Now, whilst I'm aware of the need to adopt a consistent approach, simply because one venue has less restrictions on their hours of operation does not mean that all venues should be entitled to the same, particularly when the venue in question is subject to the majority of complaints we receive. Chair, I wish to be respectful of the time of the subcommittee, therefore will finish my submission by referring to the letters of representation that I've received in relation to this application. It's understood that these have been provided for your consideration prior to this hearing, and whilst I would like to once again be respectful of the time of the subcommittee, I will not go through each representation individually. I wish to, however, refer to some key information contained within these letters of representation, simply to provide a clearer understanding to the subcommittee on the unique challenges facing these residents. You will see that a common theme amongst the letters is the recurring allegation of sleep disturbance experienced by these residents, most of whom work during the day and many of whom have young children. It is also worth pointing out at this stage that I'm currently dealing with a complaint from a young parent who has a young school-age child who, due to noise disturbance, is not being able to get ample sleep over the weekends and during the week, severely impacting them. Whilst I wish to be respectful of the family involved and do not wish to disclose the particular impact this is having on the family, as this would not be professional to do, I hope to, however, use this as an example of the concerns I have for these residents and the impact this and many similar venues are having on them. Fortunately, this family have now been placed in temporary accommodation by the council until such time as suitable accommodation can be found. We, however, believe that the noise levels experienced by this resident when considering the duration and frequency of occurrence would meet the definition of a statutory noise nuisance, and in particular would be prejudicial to the health of the inhabitants when we consider the potential for noise disturbance. Fortunately, the receptor in this case has been moved and further formal action was not required. I'm also keen to really point out that DYMK was not the sole culprit in this instance, but a number of venues which affect the living conditions of the residents of Pool Hill Terrace, as well as 23 West Hill Road. However, in granting this extension, the noise levels will undoubtedly increase significantly during the week, as this venue is, in my view, one of the main contributors to noise in the area. The main contributors to noise in the area. I take this opportunity once again to remind the subcommittee that this department has already had cause to serve a noise abatement notice on this venue. It is therefore concerning that despite a noise abatement notice specifically prohibiting noise in the rear smoking area, that residents in their letters of representation have once again made reference to being disturbed by noise from this area. Whilst not the subject of this hearing, we do have a duty to act upon these allegations of the breach of the noise abatement notice. We have in the past suggested to the business that the outdoor area, which is often the subject of complaint, be closed at midnight to offer additional protection to residents above. However, the business has advised us that in doing so, patrons would be forced to smoke in the front of the venue and may be subject to verbal abuse and aggression by patrons frequenting neighbouring premises or passing by. However, As evidenced by the letters of representation, we are still receiving complaints about the use of the smoking area. This is despite the submission of a noise management plan by the venue that the use of the outside air, noise submission plan by the venue for the use of the outside smoking area, which I believe I received in February this year. We also received complaints about bottle bins being emptied during the early hours of the morning, and attempts by residents to raise this matter with the management have been unsuccessful. Residents have made a number of references to noise from the music within the venue affecting them in their properties. Many residents therefore have no option but to vacate their properties. This presents a challenge to the owners of the properties in terms of finding suitable tenants to replace the tenants who have indeed left. One such owner has even gone so far as undertaking significant works to their property to control the noise entering the property. However, in this instance, with the proposed extension of hours, the applicant is the agent of change, and therefore there should be no expectation for the owner or the tenants to undertake any works to control noise entering their properties. I believe the noise needs to be controlled at the venue. If I may once again refer to the letters of representation, another common theme is the noise associated with the dispersal of patrons and how this affects the residents of Pool Hill Terrace and West Hill Road. If this venue was allowed to operate until 0200 on a Wednesday and Thursday with a closing time of 0300, patrons will be in the area till at least 0330. This, in my view, is excessive and would have a detrimental impact on the residents. Many of the residents have unfortunately accepted the fact that they live above a nightclub and therefore noise disturbance at unreasonable hours during the weekend is inevitable. Residents have advised me that being subject to this disturbance over the weekend and then with this application now during the week on Wednesdays and Thursdays would be completely unacceptable. Chair, you may or you may not be aware that there is a distinct lack of affordable housing in Bournemouth. Families often have no option but to move into properties often above established licensed venues such as DYMK. Many of these residents may be vulnerable or may not feel that they have a right to complain about the premises affecting them through fear of losing their home through eviction. Many advise me that they accept that the price of their property reflects the fact that they live above a licensed venue and therefore noise during the weekend is inevitable. This application is, however, to increase the hours of operation during the week, and therefore these residents will be exposed to these levels of noise for the majority of the week. In this instance, the premises is the agent of change, not the residents, and simply stating that the business was here first would not be acceptable in my view. To be clear, this is a nightclub. DYMK Bar, the new venue operating by this applicant, is located at 158 Commercial Road. Let there be no confusion. The intention of this application is to operate the venue as a nightclub, operating until 0300 on Wednesdays and Thursdays. I therefore respectfully ask that this subcommittee to consider rejecting this application for the extension of the premises license. Thank you, Chair. I have a few more bits to add, but I think I'll probably just add those in my summing up, if that's okay, Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Chair, you're on mute.
Said was if nobody's able to lip read me. Actually, we're very happy. Members prefer to hear information that you've got to give now rather than in summary, so we can consider it now as we go along. So if you had some extra points to make, Mr. Hill, please feel free to make those now. There's no time restrictions on anybody speaking. I'm very lucky. I'm not like planning where they have tight time restrictions they have to keep to. People can have as long as they so wish. So please feel free to add those extra points now.
Okay, so I'll just really conclude. Sorry, I'm on mute. No, okay, fine. So I'll just conclude my submission with the following statement. In assessing a licensing application, I need to be confident that should the license, or in this case, the extension be granted, that the prevention of nuisance objective will be upheld. In this instance, Chair, it is with great regret that I say I have no confidence in this operator being able to control the noise impacting upon the residents above. Residents have in the past approached the management to express concern about noise from the venue, noise from patrons when being dispersed at the end of the night, and from the use of their bins. Thus far, no improvement has been noted by the residents, and therefore granting this extension of hours will simply add to the existing problems with this venue and many others in close proximity. Therefore, I respectfully ask that the subcommittee obviously consider rejecting this application. I'd like to finally add that I'm really keen to assist this business in getting it right. I'd encourage them to contact me and continue to working with me so that we can agree on suitable controls that can be adopted to ensure that the compromise is reached between the business and the residents above. This approach has already proved really successful with a number of the neighbouring venues on Pool Hill, many of whom we have worked with to resolve the situation. Our team have in the past met with operators of Canvas as well as the Vault, their sound engineers and acoustic representatives to set their sound levels. We visited residents' properties with these operators to try and alleviate these concerns. I'm really hoping that DYMK, who are now in receipt of the letters of complaint from the residents, would really understand the impact that their venue is having on these residents, and perhaps use this as an opportunity to implement changes. Once again, please accept my offer of assistance, and hopefully in the future, when these matters have been resolved, perhaps we could reconsider the application to extend the hours once more. And that's me finished. Thank you very much for your time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hill, for your very, very comprehensive submission. It's extremely helpful with regard to facts, figures and current situations, etc. With regard to residents' concerns and, of course, your own as a statutory authority. Thank you very much. Miss Allen, you now have the floor with regard to your representation. Miss Allen?
Excuse me, Chair.
Chair, can I just check, are you taking questions at the end or?
What I do is I will hear all submissions and then I will hear all questions. Otherwise, it will be very confusing. Okay. It is an order of play that I take. I've got that written down. It's something that I can organise better. So I will ask for the representations to be made first, and then we will go back to questions, and each person who made a representation will have an opportunity to answer the questions as put. Thank you. So Ms. Allen, thank you for your question, Mrs. Holyoake. Miss Allen, you have the floor.
Hi, sorry, I've still got a bit of a mic problem. It just sort of seems to go quite funny. Anyway, so yeah, I've been listening to all this. So I live directly above the garden of DYMK. I can actually see the garden from my flat. So I suppose I'm going to go back to when the Dancing Jug, I was complaining about their noise as well. I've actually been complaining about everybody's noises. I'm probably one of the most complaining persons ever. But I just kind of, when the Dancing Jug had a lot of noise problems, we had sound engineers coming into my flat. And it became basically very apparent that it wasn't just the Dancing Jug. It was this was before the Vault as well. Just bearing in mind, it was also DYMK. The thing is, what's happening is my bedroom is situated right above, and I can see everything, basically. And I don't sleep sometimes at the weekend, so to the point where I just don't sleep. Which disturbs me because obviously I have to go to bed, I work and so forth and so forth. Not that it's just about me, but there's obviously, other factors. And there was a few points that I wanted to sort of look at here. I know we're going on about the bins and stuff, but I have a flatmate and she took photos of these bins that were being rattled in at early hours of the morning. And the buzzer, the thing is, we got the buzzers right on the exit, and they can either be accidentally buzzed and it is at 3 in the morning and so forth. And actually my flatmate, who's not here, she has actually emailed and rang DYMK to express what you do, you know, complain about that. In terms of people not going down the fire exit, it's actually not true. They do come through there, and it's particularly on events that we hear quite a lot of people going down there and going into the DYMK building. So that is, and it's very, very loud, particularly on those sort of events. I understand, I have actually lived here for quite some time. Obviously, when the Winchester was here, I was living here as well. But in terms of the Vault as well, I have actually spoken to the Vault, and I'm in close talking about them getting their noise levels down as well, because they've got a lot of bass in their sound system. But they have been really, really helpful. And I suppose with DYMK, what I really want to say is it's okay to sort of blame everybody else, but you have to take responsibility for your own actions as well. And when you don't get back to people, when people have complained, it's kind of like you don't really care. That's how it comes across. And I think that's really a really, really fair point to say, and particularly with all the residents that have complained. And they have complained, and I get the feedback from these people, because for some reason I do. They say no one gets back to them and no one actually rectifies the problem. It's not about the bar, it's not about the club, we love it, you know, it's great, but no one actually does anything about it. The fire exit is always open. At the weekend, we have a number of times I've had to shut the damn thing because it's, sorry if I say damn, because no one's actually at the front, at the back. So I don't, you know, I don't want to be unfair or anything, but at the end of the day, we are people that live here, and there's a lot of people that are living here. And actually, what was a really interesting point, there's more families coming into the flat buildings because obviously affordability and so forth. So you have to bear that in mind as well. When you can't sleep, it affects your well-being, it affects the way you act, it affects the way you work and everything. So there is a lot of disruption. And yes, it isn't just DYMK in a way, but I have taken measures to actually try and help these people, like the Dancing Jug. They got their license taken down from the outside part. The Vault, I work with them constantly. If there's a complaint, I will say, look, do you know what, you're really loud. But when I've actually done it with DYMK, I've not actually had some feedback from them. It's just like I don't want to be mean, but it's like you'd pass the buck. It's like, well, there's other people there, but actually everyone has to take a responsibility for their own actions and their own venues. And when you start taking responsibility for that, people then start respecting that your particular premises. So I think that's my main concern, is just take responsibility and deal with it and actually make sure the measures are being put in place, basically.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Miss Allen. Thank you. Thank you. So now, Mr. Blackburn, your opportunity to put forward your representation.
Hi, thank you. So I moved into the West Hill property in April 2021, which was during the COVID restrictions still. I want to say as well, as someone that falls into the LGBT bracket, I do like DYMK. I have been in there on occasion, so I don't have anything specifically against DYMK, but I still feel that a lot of the issues are originating there. I also I suffer with a long-standing anxiety condition where I do get fatigue and run down quite easily. So when my sleep is constantly interrupted, it does have a significant effect on me. Other venues such as the Vault Canvas and the Goat Tricycle are ones that I've spoken to since I moved in, and they've always been very kind and courteous to me. And yeah, I've raised complaints to the DYMK and I've never had a response. Going back to some of the points in the statement that Mr. Warren made. The bottle bins, they are one of my major points, and I suppose that has nothing as such to do with the license, as it were, but the license being extended would affect the hours that those are going to be emptied. At the moment, they do get emptied at around 1 to 2 a.m, I would say. I do believe it is DYMK because my bedroom overlooks the bins where they're kept, and I believe they actually have 4 bins. And I'm happy if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be, I'm happy for this to be rectified in another way. But the bins as such, there are 2. As of this morning, there's 2 red bins out there, which are biffa bins, glass bins, and then there's 2 green bins. One is marked as a Viridor Mark Dean mixed glass bin, and one is unmarked. So looking at the statement in the representation, they did mention the Hearn recycling bins. Those are a bit further down the road. These do belong to the vault, but those were never the bins that were being contested. The bins in question are the green bins. They appeared probably about a month or so after I moved in. Again, just around the time that I think DYMK would have reopened. For the first 3 weeks, they weren't collected. They were overflowing and they kept being left in front of our doorway. I had to move them on several occasions, which was very straining because they were full of glass. I complained to the council about it, and they did say that they were going to come and remove them, but nothing ever happened. So I suppose one of the things I would like, if those green bins do in fact not belong to DYMK, I want to really know, why they couldn't be taken away. If it's just the red bins that DYMK are wheeling out there, then that's fine. But the green bins, they are empty, bottles are emptied into them at about 1 to 2 a.m. on a Wednesday night, and actually the vault isn't even open on a Wednesday, so I don't believe it would be one of those venues doing it. So yeah, the walkway is used by people to access DYMK. I know that because it's often like drag queens and drag acts. I've seen them on our doorstep smoking, and then they are buzzing to get let into the property. Sometimes the bar staff do come down to collect them though, but it is being used on occasion by DYMK. I don't really know if there is a precedent whereby they should be using our walkway, or whether they could use alternative methods to have people coming in and out like that. I also don't really know if the flats that use that are also really permitted to use that, or whether they've just taken advantage of the fact it's there and that they can. As Mr. Hill said, like I've got no bad blood with DYMK as such, and I'm really happy if you guys want to put measures in place and if things can be done to make sure that this doesn't happen. If it's something that you've actually been unaware of up till now, then that's also understandable. Really, I think this is just going into the future. It would be nice to have that kind of contact to make sure that if these things are happening, that they stop and measures are put in place. Based on previous attempts at contact with DYMK, I'm not confident that if you got this license, that would actually be what happened. Like, my concern is that you would go back to just kind of ignoring us when we want to raise these points, or saying, well, it's not us, it's one of the other venues. One sec, I'm just looking down my list of notes. So yeah, I mean, this happens on nights when those venues aren't open. So again, I just want to stress out, like you said, that you think it could be the vault, but the nights this is happening, the nights that the vault isn't actually open. So I don't know why someone would be going out there to empty the bins at those times when they've not even been open. And yeah, it isn't just DYMK. I know that there are other venues that do that, but like I said, I have spoken to them and they have been courteous and tried to make amendments and measures. So yeah, that is what I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Blackburn. Thank you. So moving then to Miss Cole. Miss Cole, you have the floor.
Hello, thank you. I mainly wanted to be present just to show support for our tenants and on behalf of the landlords as well. Unfortunately, we are in the middle because we have several complaints from our tenants regarding the noise, which they believe is coming from DYMK and the issues with the bins. But after a recent meeting between Tom and Sean, the allegations were sort of denied. So we are kind of in the middle at the minute because we want to keep our tenants happy and also work with DYMK to try and figure out where the issues or disturbances are coming from so we can help the tenants. It's something which we'll have to look into further and maybe get a bit more evidence so that we can go forward. But we just want to basically ensure that our tenants are happy and comfortable living at 23 West Hill Road. So we'll try and sort of work out where the disturbances are coming from and go from there. But yeah, if there is any questions regarding sort of the management side of things, I am here to ask those. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cole. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm having to put the mic up and down because some voices are louder than others with regard to reverberation, so bear with me. Thank you very much for those submissions. So now we have questions of the responsibility of the responsible authorities and other persons. So members, you have an opportunity to ask questions first. So members, if you'd like to have any questions with regard to the responsible authorities for Mr. Hill, Councillor Kelsey.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, it was just a quick one. Mr. Hill, could you confirm the closing times of the other venues in the areas, please, particularly their midweek timings?
Yes, if you just bear with me a minute. So the Dancing Jug is till 1 a.m. That's now been increased to 2 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They're licensed till 3 a.m. on a Friday and Saturday. Sunday, they're licensed till 2 a.m. I think it's worth pointing out that the Dancing Jug have quite strict restrictions on the use of their garden area. And I believe the speakers, which has to be at background levels only. I've actually visited on a number of occasions to confirm this. The speakers cannot, the music needs to stop at midnight. Canvas, fortunately, benefit from a 24-hour license, and the Vault is exactly the same. So both these venues have 24-hour licenses. However, the performance of live music would need to take place indoors. As far as I know, the Vault and Canvas are not open throughout the week. They only operate on certain days of the week, I believe, and I may be wrong, but I believe they only operate on the weekends. But again, please, I may be wrong about the opening days, but I'm relatively sure about the opening hours.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Kelsey?
Not at the moment, but I may come back, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson, any questions for Mr. Hill?
Just one. It just struck me that the tone and level of the feeling about the problems here seems rather inconsistent. Sometimes it seemed like there were problems that were not unlike a lot of other nightclubs around the area, and other times it was made to seem like DYMK were a persistent thorn in your side that you were having constant issues with. And I'm wondering if it's the latter, why haven't there been more frequent visits or reviews? You mentioned the noise abatement notice, but that was issued 3 years ago, and in your opening remarks you said that had been complied with. barring a couple of minor incidents. So could you just clarify your position at which end of the spectrum you think this is? Because if it's at one end, that might lead us one way. If it's at the other end, I'd be wondering why there haven't been more concerns relayed to the licensing committee. Thank you.
So,
Mr. Hill, please answer those questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So first of all, Councillor Johnson, there. First of all, I mean, I think I pointed out in my submission that that the issues of noise are not only related to DYMK. So a number of the venues have been implicated in noise complaints. You know, absolutely. I think by far, in terms of officer, we have an out-of-hours noise team. Our out-of-hours officers do proactive noise monitoring in the area. And very often they have mentioned to me that noise levels at DYMK were excessive, as well as other venues as well. I think in considering the submissions from the residents, I was aware that there was an issue with DYMK. I don't think I was aware of how severe the issue was until I read the submissions by the residents in relation to this matter. I think more importantly, I think my concern about the use of the external smoking area. I was under the impression that the noise had been controlled in this area. And I think the submission from the residents is that they are still being disturbed by noise, particularly Mary Ellen. They're still being disturbed by noise from this area. So again, that would warrant further investigation. I think finally, a neighbouring premises had put in an application to me to increase the hours of operation. As part of the application, they submitted an acoustic survey. The findings of that acoustic survey were very, very clear that most of the noise that's experienced in the area does come from DYMK. I didn't think it appropriate for me to actually submit that as part of my evidence because the report was commissioned by another business. It wouldn't be professional for me to submit that report as evidence. I think if I'm completely honest, I was always aware that of a number of venues in the area that are creating noise disturbance to the residents. Quite often when we get complaints, we get a number of venues are complained about. However, the purpose of this hearing is to determine this extension of license, the extension for DYMK. If indeed a further application was made from any of the other venues, I would consider that as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions, Councillor Johnson?
No, Chair, not this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't have any questions myself. So now we have questions from Mr. Warren to Mr. Hill. Mr. Warren, do you have any questions for Mr. Hill?
I do, Chair, and I know I've got to address them through you, and obviously there will be no cross-examination, but I think there's some points that I do have concerns about, if you're happy for me to...
Indeed, carry on.
Mr. Hill has literally just raised a report.
Oh, no, you'll need to be closer to your microphone. You keep going out, Mr. Warren. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, new laptop in it. I tend to struggle with it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, stay close to your microphone, thank you.
I will do, thank you. Mr. Hill has just literally mentioned a report, and he's not relying on it, but he's literally relied on it to criticise DYMK and not provided a copy which would allow us a chance to respond to it. Are you willing to retract any reference to that report, because you've effectively just used it to damn the applicant here without any chance of them being able to respond to it?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Warren. I'm going to bring in our legal advisor, if I may, please. Mrs. Cole, could you advise the subcommittee with regard to that point as to materially relying on verbal evidence? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, it is a tricky one. Yes, as we all know, any new evidence shouldn't be just produced on the day of the hearing without the agreement of all parties, and we didn't hear that. I believe Mr. Hill was aware of that, which is why he didn't mention it initially. But I think it's for you. I mean, you've heard it now. he can't retract it because it's been said and you've heard it, but you've just got to give it that weight and recognise that the applicant isn't in a position to respond to that because they haven't seen it.
Yes, indeed. So I think we will give it the weight based on that that would be proportionate and appropriate. So thank you for raising that, Mr. Warren. We certainly have in mind that point, and as advised by a legal advisor, we'll take into account the way in which it was put and what was said and give it proportionate weight. So you have no fear of that, and thank you for raising that.
I do have some further points that
yes, and if you'd like to make your further points, thank you. Or raise your further questions, Mr.
Thank you. And it goes to a point I think Councillor Johnson raised, and I just want to explore it a bit further. When was the last time you raised any complaints with DYMK?
Mr. Hill?
I don't have access to our Civica database at the moment, so I can't give you the exact date.
Would
an
you
indication of it last year, 2 weeks ago?
From your recollection of dealing with these matters, Mr. Hill, as you are the appointed officer, what do you remember? I don't think Mr. Warren is looking for specific dates, but some area of time, some period.
I believe my last interaction with this business was when they applied for a temporary event notice, which was a few months ago. I supported that notice. I believe I did also send an email to Billy Swales, the manager, in relation to just providing him advice in terms of the temporary event notice and ensuring that making them aware that we are still receiving complaints.
I think there's some confusion, Mr. Hill. The question was, when was the last complaint you heard of? I think was the question for you, Mr. Ward. Is that correct?
So I think it's important to point out that my submission is very much based on the fact that the letters of submission that I was in receipt of the residents. I think I have not received a complaint for quite some time. However, my representation today is very much based on the letters of representation that I was copied into by the residents, which to me raised an issue which warrants further investigation.
Yes, we would understand that, Mr. Hill, of course. Thank you for that. So I think you have your answer there, Mr. Warren. Any further questions?
I do. I'm sorry. There are a few here.
No, it's fine.
So
Take your time.
clarify them out. You didn't mention any videos provided by Sean to you in relation to noise outbreak from various other premises when DYMK was closed. Can you confirm that you received video evidence of noise outbreak from other premises?
I absolutely can. I'm in receipt of evidence from a number of businesses. Absolutely, I can confirm I did receive that evidence. And appropriate action was taken. The venue in question was approached. The evidence was shown to them, and corrective action was taken by the venue.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. You mentioned a family complaint and a family having to move out, which is obviously very sad and a serious allegation. Have you ever raised that with DYMK before?
No, and the reason for that is because first of all, the complainant had left, or the family has now been moved. The allegation is about not only DYMK, but a number of venues which are affecting these residents. So, and my submission is very clear in terms of that, you know, if this extension is granted, that, you know, families will be affected during the week. So no, to answer your question, Mr. Warren, I didn't actually approach DYMK directly in relation to this matter. The reason for that as well is obviously I have to prevent the, So yeah, no, I did not speak to DYMK in relation to this matter.
Okay. And when did you last visit any other premises in relation to investigating complaints in the area?
I visited, I did a joint visit to another large nightclub, I believe 2 months ago when I was on out of hours. The purpose of that visit was to actually meet with the sound engineer of the venue to on an offer from them in relation to complaints they'd received about noise, and we spent quite a bit of time assessing the noise levels within the venue and adjusting the noise levels accordingly. So I have done. Okay. Did a visit to a neighbouring venue after they were made aware of a complaint that we received about it.
And have you had any invitations from DYMK to visit them?
I have visited DYMK, and most recently I did get an invitation from DYMK soon after this application was received to assess the suitability of the windows in the venue. My response to I believe Billy Swales, the manager, was that my view is that replacing the windows will have no effect on the structure-borne noise transmission within the venue. The concern from the residents above is that it's structure-borne noise transmission, and therefore replacing the windows would have no effect on that. I believe the windows are in the front elevation of the property. Secondly, the concern is about the noise in the rear garden area, and again, replacing the windows would have no effect on the noise in the rear garden area.
Gentlemen, so, if you can remember, please, to come through the chairman for questions and no cross-questioning of parties, please. Thank you.
Chair, I suppose and these are just two final concerns, just to tie things up. The bottle bins. Have you actually done any investigations as to where the noise was coming from? i.e., have you ever asked DYMK as to whether it's their bottle bins?
No. The reason for that. No. The reason for that is because, once again, my submission is very much based on the submission from the residents. Fortunately, within our department, we have a commercial waste team who deals specifically with complaints about noise from commercial waste. But no, I've not actually investigated. I've not had opportunity to investigate the issue with regards to the bottle bins. I was only made aware of the impact of these bottle bins on residents once I looked at the letters of representation by residents.
Okay,
thank you. And
this will be investigated, though.
We hope so. We're looking forward to it.
And do you have another question, Mr. Warren?
There was just a final question, and I suppose it sort of ties everything together. That there appears to have been no attempt to distinguish between the venues. You talk in generalities about lots of venues causing noise at different times, and I just wonder, what have you done to actually, in your role as environmental protection officer, have you visited these flats to see if the noise is from DYMK? Have you tried to distinguish yourself between the noise?
I absolutely have. I visited the properties I visited a property overlooking the beer garden to the Dancing Jug, and at that time there was no evidence of that. The noise in the residence property was clearly not from the Dancing Jug. It was from the neighbouring property. So that has been done. Now, that visit was done quite some time ago. So that visit was not done within the last 6 months. However, my opinion was formed. I formed an opinion in terms of the noise of the beer garden. I think it's also worth pointing out that I myself have witnessed noise from the beer garden area or from the smoking area, which amounted to a statutory noise nuisance. And although it may have been absolutely, yeah, and I was under the impression that this had been dealt with. However, looking at the representations from the residents, it appears that they are still being they're still being affected by noise from this area. And again, perhaps it's not appropriate for me to make reference to the acoustic report, but that also clearly showed that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Are you content, Mr. Byrne?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you for indulging me.
No, indeed. I have a question out of that with regard to clarification. Our licensing officer, Mrs. Jardim, have you received any noise complaints? Because you'll have access to records. You may not know them. Check, Ms. Jardim.
Apologies, Chair. Yes, and in preparation for my for the hearing today, the only ones I found were, so there are a lot of temporary event notices that have taken place recently, but other than that, what I could see was noise in September 2021. I think there might have been an investigation. I can't go into the details because I don't know. I just made note of any complaints that we might have had previously.
In answer to Mr. Verne's question, then, to be clear, the last complaint, noise of complaint, formal complaint, was September 2021. If that's helpful. Thank you very much. So now we have an opportunity for.
Chair, excuse me. May I? Sorry, Chair, Councillor Kelsey. May I come back?
Oh, yes, of course, Councillor Kelsey, come in.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. On the occasion of the last 10. Why did you not object to it if you still had major concerns about the noise?
I believe that there would not be a nuisance. I believe the 10. I don't have the 10 in front of me, Councillor Kelsey, but I believe I used my professional judgment at the time and thought that maybe the event, if I cast my, I think it was a drag act, or I really don't know, but I would have thought at the time that the event was unlikely to create noise nuisance. I think it's worth pointing out as well that I've received no complaints after the event either.
So therefore, that surely goes to constitute that the premises are capable of operating correctly and within noise levels. If you're satisfied and had no complaints after an event that you were happy to sanction, I'm struggling to find why you're now wanting to sanction this application.
A further temporary event notice was applied for in November, which I objected to, based on my concerns of of nuisance.
Did that temporary event notice go ahead?
I don't believe it did.
Okay, thank you. And one other further question is there's been a lot of, and I fully appreciate the complaints from the residents. I live next door to a dairy, and the noise of bottle banks being opened at all hours of the night is downright annoying, to say the least. But I am struggling that we are not able to specifically identify any one venue. Now, you supported the application for extension of another premises in the area, and I'm wondering if you are able to enlighten us as to how you were able to approve that one whilst you are disapproving of this one to the same terminal hour.
The reason for that is the solicitor acting on behalf of the resident contacted me, and quite a bit of negotiation. There was quite a bit of discussion in terms of additional controls and additional mitigation they could offer to limit the noise exposure to residents. No attempt has been made by the solicitor acting on behalf of this applicant to mitigate the control, to mitigate the noise impact. I think if you look at the operating schedule, again, I believe no additional measures have been offered in relation to noise. Most of the additional measures have been offered in relation to the control of patrons, which have been agreed with the police. But the operator did not approach me to actually try and negotiate or agree on any additional noise conditions.
If I may, Chair.
Yes, of course.
Would you see any different conditions inserted for the opening hours for the Wednesday and Thursday to 2 o'clock that are not already in place for the opening hours till 4 o'clock on a Friday and Saturday?
I have the current premises license in front of me. My view is that the conditions that are offered on this current premises license are not very, very good in relation to the controlling of noise. So my view is that the conditions are actually not very good on this license condition, on this license, and we would be looking to, if further complaints were received, we would be looking to review this premises license or seek to review.
But you're not doing that at the present in time, so therefore those conditions are. Please don't interrupt me, Mr. Hill. Those conditions are deemed satisfactory for you at this time. Otherwise, the licence would not be allowable. Is that correct?
Mr. Hill?
At present, the conditions on the license are the conditions on the license. I think my view that if we did receive any further complaints that were specifically related to this venue, we would exercise our right to bring the premises license in for review. At that time, I would seek to apply far more robust conditions to the premises license.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll bring you in, Mr. Byrne. Actually, Mr. Byrne, I want to ask a question of you, actually. I just need clarification of what the beer garden's used for and when. I think that would help throw some light on this.
Of course, since the noise abatement notice was served, it's been used purely for smoking only. Now, at the moment, the premises opens from 10 p.m. at night, so it's used as a smoking area. And as I say, it's got automatic closes on the doors, etc., and speakers have been moved. So that's what it's being used for. And actually, we certainly would have no objection to a condition along the lines of the external area to be used for smoking only after 2200 hours, if that would assist the committee. But the truth of the matter is, I'm slightly concerned that we have an EH officer who's not raised in a rep any concern about the conditions at all, and is now suddenly determining that the license isn't fit for purpose. That does give me a cause for concern. It has to be said, because it sort of leaves us all a little bit on the hoof, doesn't it?
Okay.
But I'm happy to offer a condition on that basis that the garden, the external area, courtyard, however you want to define it, would only be used for smoking after 2200 hours, which, if the premises were to open earlier, it could allow for drinking there, but then for closing at a reasonable time, just for smokers.
Okay. So if we could note that offered condition, if we were so prompt, please, Mrs. Hollyoak, could you do that for us, please?
That's noted, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those points. We now have no further questions for Mr. Hill from Councillor Johnson or Councillor Kelsey.
Mr. Hill has his hand raised, Chair.
I'm not sure if it's a legacy hand. Mr. Hill, did you want to further answer a question?
I do. I just want to add that in relation to one of the submissions, I think it's clear to point out that although I may not have received a huge amount of noise complaints recently about this venue, I think this application is to increase the hours during the week. And my submission is based on the fact that I am really concerned that I will receive far more complaints. Because as I think, as I mentioned in my submission, many of the residents seem to believe that noise during the weekend is inevitable, but we're looking to extend the hours during the week. And my concern is that if this is granted, I will be receipt of far more complaints from residents about noise during the week.
Thank you. I do have one question with regard to why you have said on various occasions that you were so minded with regard to your complaint being exacerbated by the fact of reading the objections. So what impact did that have on your own submission? Because your submission obviously comes from a professional point of view. But you say that you were moved, so to speak, by the objections which had been received from our objectors. So just wanted to try and work out the proportionality of that, Mr. Hill. Could you advise us?
I think my objection still do believe that this venue, if being allowed to operate up until the earliest hours of the morning during the weekend, is going to substantially increase the noise in the area. So, and whether I read the submissions from the objectors or not, I don't think that would have changed my view. I think the submissions from the residents really sort of substantiated my view, I suppose. But I always had the same view. My view has always been about this venue. And I think it's important to point out that I'm not only in the environmental health team, we face a particular challenge with not only this venue and also the other venues above. However, we have to deal with what we've got at the moment. And this application is to substantially increase the noise levels in the area. So although it may seem that I'm targeting DYMK, I believe that as a local authority, we have a duty to protect our residents, and I believe this application will have the effect of substantially increasing the noise in the area.
Yes, and just to say to you, Mr. Hill, we understand you have an incredibly difficult job. It's the judgment of Solomon, isn't it? And the sword of Damocles all in one place. So we do understand that, and we're extremely grateful for you in unpicking, so to speak, as much as you possibly can to advise the subcommittee. So please don't feel that any of the questions were meant in a derogatory fashion with regard to your professional capacity. They certainly weren't. We were just trying to tease out the issues. And we're very grateful for your representations and your submissions. Thank you. So moving now, questions now. We have questions of the objectors. So we have our three objectors. We have Miss Allen, we have Mr. Blackburn, and we have Miss Cole. So Councillor Kelsey, do you have any questions for any of those objectors, please?
No, I don't, Chair. I think the questions that I would have raised, Mr. Hill has mostly answered those points anyway, and the objectors obviously have their views on what it is. Like I say, living next door to somewhere with loud music is not always comfortable, and it takes a certain sort of person to be able to live there, and I understand where they're coming from.
Indeed, thank you very much. And Councillor Johnson, again, do you have any questions for Miss Allen, Mr. Blackburn or Miss Cole?
No questions, Chair. Thank you. No.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Warren, do you have Allen, Mr. Blackburn or Miss Cole?
I have one question for Hannah, for Miss Cole.
Miss Cole, thank you.
Sorry. Apologies. You mentioned that several complaints have been made in the past. Have you ever approached DYMK previously when you've got these complaints?
Miss Cole, did you hear that?
Hello. Yeah, I believe the landlord, Joe Cole, has been in contact with either Billy or Sean on things. I think it is over text. So Tom and Joe have been in contact with them previously, but I haven't personally myself. I pass any on to the landlords, and then they deal with it because I think they've got a relationship with them rather than myself.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor, I think it's not a question, but it's worth just saying at this time. And there seems to be a miscommunication about who's talking to whom. No one sort of seems to know who's talking to whom. I'll address that in summing up, but clearly anyone who wants to talk to Sean, they know who he is now. Yes, we will offer a condition on that basis. Hopefully we can get talking properly.
Sean Mitchell is the operator.
That's right, and effectively
so
he is.
If we could refer for the purposes of public domain, Mr. Mitchell, rather than his first name.
Sorry, Councillor, Mr. Mitchell.
Try to be more formal when we're in session. That's kind of you. So no further questions of the objectors. Just to make sure we're all clear. I think we've had a good opportunity there. I have one question, actually just for iteration, which is for Mr. Hill. No, it isn't for Mr. Hill. It will be for our operator. Is there any clarification re the bins, the red bins, and who owns and uses what? We did go into there was quite some explanation. I think it was Mr. Blackburn who told us all about the bins, and I was a little bit confused in there as to which bins did what. So either to hear from you, Mr. Warren, or the operator as to with regard to what responsibility is with the bins and what you actually do. Thank you.
For Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you.
Answer.
Yeah, there seems to be some confusion. Of all the venues, we are the only ones that have a dedicated bin store that is directly next to the flats at 23 West Hill Road. Our bins are our bottle skips, which from behind the bar they put all the bottles into, are emptied on a Wednesday afternoon, which they were done yesterday. I did them myself with someone else. They're put into two dedicated glass dustbins, and then they are wheeled out to the loading bay on West Hill Road. They're then brought back in Thursday afternoon. They'll still be there now. That's it. All the other venues do have bins out on the street. We can't be responsible for when the binmen actually empty them as to where they put them back, but we bring them back as soon as possible. So our bins are never emptied at 2, 3 in the morning.
Can I ask a polite question?
So you disappeared there, Mr. Mitchell. So your bins are emptied during the daytime. Obviously, BCP don't do, as far as I understand it, 3 p.m. collections. So there would be no danger of that happening. So you put your bottle bins out on Wednesday, and they are collected during the daylight hours at some stage during that day, and then you bring them in on the Thursday. Is that correct?
We put them out Wednesday evening.
Yeah.
Ready for collection Thursday morning.
Thursday morning, I understand. So they're actually emptied on Thursday morning, but at no stage is that you are advising us that there's no noisy movement of bottles, from one bin to the other during time hours.
Also, we don't. I heard about the red biffa bins earlier. We don't have a contract with biffa. They're not our bins.
That's useful to know.
Windows.
So the red biffa bins are of you have no remit or responsibility with regard to those. Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you.
Can I ask a polite question, just because I want to clear it up as much as anything?
Who is this? I've got a voice, but I don't know who it is.
Blackburn.
Mr. Blackburn.
Yeah.
I will allow you, Mr. Blackburn, quickly to ask your question. You are a little out of turn, but please ask it for clarity quickly. Thank you.
No, so Mr. Mitchell is saying those aren't your bins. So the red ones aren't yours, and would the green ones be yours? There's a green one where it has a big crack in the side.
Okay, that's your question, Mr. Blackburn. Are the green bins yours, the one with the large crack in the side? Is that your responsibility?
The green bins are ours, and I've only just noticed that crack, which is now being replaced by our waste management company.
Thank you very much. I think that was Mr. Blackburn's concern. Yeah. It's not a licensing matter, Mr. Blackburn, so if we could please get back to our licensing issues, but I do understand concern. You've had the opportunity there, and it looks as if that has been cleared up satisfactorily, and the green bin is now being replaced. I hope that was the matter that you were wishing to address. Something of a licensing matter, please do advise me. Are you content, Mr. Blackburn?
Well, no, because those bins are always outside. They're never.
But it's a license. It's the green bin is. How is that affecting licensing? Is it a noise issue? What is it? What are the? Mr. Blackburn, if you bear with me, please.
Sorry.
In order to clarify the question you want to ask, I want to make sure that your questions are so that it's satisfactorily answered for you. But I don't understand what you're trying to ask. So one of the 4 licensing objectives is that bin in breach of or causing an issue with? Could you advise us, and we'll see if we can get an answer to your question.
I would say sound, because those are the ones where I believe that the bottles are being emptied in. And those are the ones that have been left outside the property largely since I moved in. Those are always the ones that I've been complaining about. So again, Mr. Mitchell, I don't know if this is just something where you don't know that this is the case, but those bins are left outside quite consistently, and the bottles are emptied into them from my experience. So I want to get this cleared up as much as anything.
I understand. So there's a clear condition that shouldn't happen. So you believe that condition's being breached because those bottles are being emptied into there outside the times that they should be.
That is my belief, yes.
Oh, that's your belief. Okay, well, that would be a condition breach, and that would be something which would come under review if that were to be a complaint that you can put in with regard to an alleged condition breach, if you thought that fit. I think we're moving away from the actual application, but I do understand your concerns around that, and I think that Mr. Mitchell has heard you loud and clear. So I'm very much hoping that if issues do sit around that, and that those issues can be corrected by Mr. Mitchell. If that is the case, it's all a little smoke and mirrors, because I don't know. I am listening to what a lot of people are advising me, and I want to please all of the people all the time, and it's something which is of course very, very difficult. So Mr. Blackburn, I hope that helps. Your point has been made, and Mr. Mitchell has certainly heard you. Is that of some use to you?
Yeah, that was fine. Thank you for letting me do
Well,
that.
you're very kind, Mr. Blackburn, to let me off so lightly. Bless your heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving then, we've had all questions of our responsible authorities and other persons. Questions have been asked of them, I believe, by all parties. If we're all content, just looking for any hands. None. Okay. So now is our opportunity for all to sum up with regard to and do please bring in anything new which may have arisen from the debate that we've. You have the floor first with regard to your summary. Thank you. Inviting you, Ms. Cole. It is your opportunity now for your summary as to what you would like to say for the subcommittee to consider with regard to this application.
Okay, thank you. We just want to make sure that our tenants are sort of happy and comfortable and getting any disturbances dealt with. And yeah, we just want to work together with all parties to make sure that that can happen.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Cole. It's extremely helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now, Mr. Blackburn, your opportunity. You have the floor.
Yeah, so I mean, as I said, I have nothing against DYMK. I am a customer there. I fall into the bracket of your customer base. I just want to, yeah, primarily work with you to make sure that any issues that might be going on that you weren't aware of, or where there can be improvements, are made. The condition, I think it was a condition, sorry, where I wasn't sure on this, and that's what I wanted to ask in regards to having more contact with Mr. Mitchell or working with him on that. Did Mr. Warren say that could be added as a condition, or am I understanding that correctly?
It wouldn't be conditioned, obviously. I'm sure that you know, to have a condition to be able to access somebody is not something the Licence Committee could do. But I think, as I say, that you know, your submissions and what you've said has been heard loud and clear. And I obviously, Mr. Warren has also said, you know, he's heard what you've said and he will endeavour to make these things happen. But it's not something the Licensing Committee could condition per se. But all parties in the room, we're all grown ups. We've heard the conversation. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, if we had like more kind of like indication of how you could be contacted, or you know, working with you on that, that would be an improvement. I would see that as an improvement. I'm still concerned about what would happen after the license is granted in relation to if any of these issues continue to occur. But yes, I am slightly happier after this meeting.
Obviously, interspersing there, because I think it's appropriate. If we were so disposed to grant, and we haven't made up our minds yet, Mr. Blackburn, we will do that as a committee together after this. The meeting is drawn to a close. There is an opportunity which has happened before, where a number can be provided on the premise. So any noise nuisance that is occurring, there can be a number which can be provided, so that number can be called. We have done that before. And whether that's conditioned or not, I will be advised by our legal officer, but that is something that we could perhaps consider. Mrs. Cole, would you comment, please?
Certainly, Chair. Yes, that can be a condition, that there should be contact details of whoever's running the premises on a night be available at, you know, at the premises or near the premises. I suppose the difficulty here with that is generally we would have a notice or something in the premises, and most of these complaints are really arising from people outside the premises. But often there have been in the past conditions that an operator has let residents know of particular contact details. Yes, we could ask that happens as well.
Yes, thank you. I do remember that it's been put on some premises, you know, the number outside, you know, are we being noisy? Are we causing trouble? Whatever it is, you know, please call us, because obviously they wish to work in the community to do that. So I think if that is being offered if that were to be offered from the applicant, I'm sure that the subcommittee would take that under consideration, but I will leave that for the applicant. But I hope that would give some assurance to Mr. Blackburn that were we so disposed to grant that we had endeavoured to keep that communication between the operator and the local community. If of course the operator so wishes to offer that condition, but it's very much a matter for them.
Another like conditional suggestion would be to make sure that the bottles absolutely cannot be emptied in the early hours of the morning. I understand that Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Warren have said that's not happening. In my experience, I have heard people coming down the corridor, because it is directly below my bedroom, opening our doors and going out to use those bins in the early hours. I have heard from my bedroom, what I believe are the bar staff from DYMK, having been in there myself, outside my bedroom window in the early hours of the morning. Obviously, as I said, like if that's something you weren't aware of, then I completely understand that, but I do still believe that my statements have been correct in terms of my actual experience. But yeah, we can all work together.
We're in danger of having a debate here, Mr.
Oh, sorry.
So with the deepest of respect, if you could put your hand up if you so wish to speak, so I can control the meeting. I'm just looking to see if there is any condition with when the bottles are removed or there's noise. If I could be assisted, Mrs. Jardim. Oh, Mrs. Cole, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've just been looking at the conditions on the licence, and I know Mr. Hill has also commented on them. They are a little vague. There's a section on prevention of public nuisance and conditions 215 to 218, and the condition about is just talking about excessive noise, and we certainly could put a condition on there about times for bin openings, and it's quite a common condition generally on any premises that we don't allow bins to be bottles and bins and everything to be removed from the premises after 10 or 11 o'clock at night. I mean, it's quite common condition that's on many.
It's a very general condition and does apply, and of course some of these licenses are fairly old, so all the new ones would carry.
Chair, what we can do as part of your consideration of the licence when you make a decision is we can just look at the conditions that have been offered anyway, or part of the application, and also just look at those prevention of public nuisance, that section of conditions, to see if anything more appropriate could be put clearer.
Yes, if we were so disposed to grant, then of course we will do that. We'll look at it in any event and then see if we're so disposed to grant. Hope that gives you some confidence, Mr. Blackburn.
Yeah, that was all I wanted.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to tick you off, but it's very difficult to control the meeting when I have so many people.
No, that's okay.
I'm very, very passionate about speaking, so forgive me.
No, I'm sorry if I didn't realise. I do apologise.
No, indeed not. Thank you so much. So now we have Miss Allen, your opportunity to sum up.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, well, hopefully we can all work together. I mean, I work very close, like I've said before, I work well with the Vault. I'm always in constant communication. They communicate with me directly, and also with the Dancing Jug, I communicate directly with them. Obviously, I have tried with DYMK, but there's been nothing so far, and I think that's a consensus with everybody. In terms of the noise, people don't always complain to the environment because people don't. We basically, the people that have complained that I am aware of, we complain direct to DYMK, either through text message on Facebook or through telephone or walking into the premises. So I just wanted to make that aware. Yeah, so better communication, actually confronting it and taking responsibility for each and every one of us. and you guys and everybody. All right.
No, yeah, lovely, beautifully put. Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Nolan. Thank you
Cool.
so much. Thank you. Mr. Hill, your opportunity for your summary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I think just to remind you that this application is to increase the hours of operation during the week. And therefore my concerns, although many people have spoken in terms of the mitigation they can offer in terms of the bins, in terms of, I know there was a discussion about perhaps introducing additional license conditions. My concerns are still the same. I'm really concerned that these residents will be exposed to additional noise levels for the majority of the week. I think it's clear that, this premises is now going to be the agents of change, and I think they're going to be significantly increasing the noise levels during the week. And as I'm sure we're all aware, noise tends to be blended. It's not only this venue, there's other venues as well. But my concern is, I still have a concern that the impact of this will raise the ambient noise levels in the area significantly during the week, this is going to have this will have an adverse impact on our residents. To be clear, this is a nightclub. Nightclubs are noisy. We're all aware of that. There's no conditions on the premises license which specifically mention the use of a noise limiter. There's no conditions which mention in terms of preventing bass noise. I would be quite keen for those to be implemented, for those to be added to the license, if indeed an opportunity does arise to review this premises license. The intention of this is for the applicant to operate until 3 a.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays. We're all aware that even though the venue may close at 3 a.m., people would still be in the area till 3:30. Again, this would have an impact on the residents. I think I really just want to finish off by saying that as environmental health, we are one of the statutory consultees. And I think you'll be aware it's not very often we attend these licensing hearings. We pride ourselves in working with businesses to try and resolve situations. So I'd like to add that I am still really, really keen to assist this business in getting it right. So more than happy to continue to working with them so we can agree on suitable controls. It's in my interest as well as the business's interest so that once a compromise is reached between the business and the residents. The residents aren't going anywhere. If anything, I think Mary Ellen mentioned the fact that we're finding more, because of the lack of affordable housing in Bournemouth, we're finding more and more people who are having to live in accommodation above licensed premises. And many of these people may not, many of these people may be vulnerable. So we have to ensure that these residents are protected. I also acknowledge the particular challenges facing the late nights economy in Bournemouth. I understand the problems facing businesses in terms of the cost of living crisis. I am aware that businesses, that particularly our late night licensed venues, were absolutely decimated through the COVID-19 pandemic. So I acknowledge all of that. So I'm more than happy to assist the business in any way I can to prevent them, to allow them to be profitable. But ultimately, I have a duty towards our residents. I have a duty towards public health. And if I believe, in my professional opinion, that residents are going to be exposed to excessive noise levels, and indeed with this application, that residents may be exposed to excessive noise levels, which may be prejudicial to their health, I have a duty to make representations against it. And so that ends my submission, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Hill. Mr. Warren, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And we have covered an awful lot of ground. And thank you for the time, and apologies where I've addressed people a little more casually than your committee likes. I'll try not to do it again. Firstly, and this is an offer that's made through me via Sean through me. So Mr. Mitchell is making this offer through me. he wants to speak to residents. There's clearly a disconnect about who residents have been speaking to, but now Mr. Mitchell has here and has been made available. He will directly deal with any residents and any concerns they have. So for the residents who are here today and any other residents who have made representations, please take us up on that opportunity to do so. Mr. Hill's representation, I'm afraid, was very sparse in terms of any evidence. It certainly didn't mention any conditions. It certainly didn't mention that he had issues with the operating schedule. He has been invited to work with the business. Mr. Mitchell has made that invitation to him when he first made his representation, and we haven't had a response to that. And I'll remind this committee that blended noise, which is a term he used, is not relevant to this application. I would have expected an officer who comes before this committee on a public forum, which is being broadcast, and makes a threat of review of a premises license, to be able to point to recent nuisance directly. In fact, he, as your councillor questioned him about, did not object to a Halloween temporary event notice that had occurred over 2 days, and indeed there was no evidence of any nuisance that follows it. We are prepared, and I've been listening very carefully, and in fact I had these noted down before, councillor, your discussion with your solicitor. 3 conditions that we thought might assist him. Number 1, we've discussed the garden to be a smoking only area after 2200 hours. Number 2, external bottle bins only to be emptied between 10 AM and we put 2000 hours. Now that's what we propose. So between 10 AM and 8 PM, that's the external bottle bins. If that assists and hopefully gives some comfort to the residents. And the 3rd condition, and you would have a wording, and I'm sure you have a wording that you prefer for this kind of thing, a number to be made available to residents in case of making complaints. Now we had those 3 noted down, and we're prepared to offer those. Indeed, you raised them as part of your questions to your legal officer, and we're happy that all 3 can be put in and enforceable. One of those conditions, obviously, well, they all relate to specific issues that have been raised. I am concerned that we have Mr. Hill here who suddenly decides that the operating schedule and the conditions on the license aren't good enough. There is a robust operating schedule being proposed to replace that's there. The premises does run to 4 AM in the morning over the weekends, and there was no issues or evidence raised of music outbreak there in specific terms, and no visits from environmental protection since 2021. Just as an aside, actually, the number that we are offering to be made available to residents, Sean actually offered through Mr. Hill about a year ago. I don't know whether Mr. Hill made that number available to residents, but he has been trying to improve those relations, and hopefully we can now do that. This is a good forum for people to get together. In fact, in all public hearings, we'd have all had a chat around this and while you were determining the matter, which is always good. It's one of the downsides, I think, of hearings online. There is evidence, the video to Mr. Hill, of noise from other premises. The statement of Mr. Proctor that's included with Mr. Mitchell's statement. We know there are speakers outside the Dancing Jug. We're not saying that any issues are everyone else's fault and nothing to do with us. What we're saying is if you come to us with issues, we will do everything we can to assist, such as when Mr. Hill came a year ago, identified a possible source of noise leak. It wasn't identified as a source of noise leak, but a possible one, and that was immediately corrected. So I hope that gives some comfort here, that the applicants do take these matters seriously. But on a positive note, this application actually prevents 2 potential points of dispersal. You've heard about the later hours and people going to other premises when this premises currently closes on a Wednesday and Thursday. You've heard about keeping people inside and then allowing them to go and use the taxi ranks. And of course, you have the robust operating schedule and 3 additional conditions if you were minded to grant this application. I would remind you, Chair, there is the variation to the plans as well, which hasn't been discussed in any way. And I'd submit that if you would grant that, that would be very helpful for the premises. Those are our submissions today. there has been confusion about where incidents and noise is coming from. Anything we can do to work with the residents, we will do so. And the same goes with the owners of the properties. We hope we've given you some comfort there. But my submission is that with the 3 additional conditions and the change to the operating schedule, this is granted, and indeed will promote the licensing objective as amended 2 AM, not 3 AM, etc. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Last and by no means least, I always like to ask the applicant himself, although you have had representation kindly provided today by Mr. Warren, but if there's anything that you would like to add, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Yes, I've been quite surprised. Communication is key. My number was offered over a year ago for Mr. Hill to give to residents in an email on the 12th of October. I'm very approachable. We don't want to cause any problems with residents. We just provide a safe environment. I just want to re-emphasise, because it keeps being said 3 AM and people still around till 3 AM. We will actually be closing at 2 AM. Just for clarification there, alcohol will stop at 2 o'clock. Although we can stay open legally till 3 o'clock for dispersal, we will not be operating till 3 o'clock in the morning, and people will not still be around in the streets at 3:30 in the morning for DYMK. It is just literally 1 hour on Wednesday and 1 hour on Thursday is all we're asking to extend. And once again, I'm at DYMK now. If any of the residents are in the flat, I'm here for a few hours. Please come down to the courtyard. I'm happy to answer any questions. You will all have my mobile. The fastest way to communicate is probably on Messenger through Facebook or other social medias, because that's on 24/7, and the manager on duty will always have access to that account. But you will all have my personal number as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mitchell. So I hope that everybody feels that they've had ample opportunity to put forward their concerns, their questions. The questions have been answered, and I think we've had a very good, expansive debate with regard to this application. Members, Councillors Johnson and Kelsey, I don't know if there's any last minute questions that you want to ask, just in case it's just checking. No, I'm not hearing anything. Bless your hearts, I'm not hearing anything, that's fine. It is a sensitive application, and of course the subcommittee will go away now and deliberate carefully with regard to this application. So with that said, the hearing's now concluded, and the subcommittee are going to adjourn in private with our legal advisor, Mrs. Cole, and our clerk, Mrs. Hollyoak, and notification of the subcommittee's decision will be provided within the period of 5 working days, beginning with the day or the last day on which the hearing was held in accordance with the regulations, and that is today, Thursday, 24th of November 2022. That's for public notification, and notification decision will include information about the right of appeal as appropriate. And I'll ask our legal advisor, Mrs. Cole, if she kindly advise with regard to that matter. Thank you.
Of course, Chair. There will be a right of appeal to whatever decision is made today. That appeal should be made to Dorset Magistrates Court within 21 days of formal notification of today's decision. All of the information regarding appeal will be set out in the decision letter if the decision is to grant or not. And both the applicant and those making reps can also, they're entitled to appeal.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time and consideration, and I wish you a good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors.
Well, you don't, I wish you a good afternoon.
Good afternoon.